Good morning. Time to call the February MTA Board Meeting to order. Paige, General Counsel Paige Graves, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are joined online by a couple members of the board. If I'm not mistaken, I see Mr. Glucksman dialing in from his remote location, and Mr. Mack is on as well. Anybody else on the board participating remotely? Okay. Safety announcement, please.
Your safety is of the foremost importance to the MTA. Therefore, we ask that you listen and adhere to the following instructions. If you witness an emergency, notify emergency personnel in the room and call 911 immediately. Please follow any audible instructions provided through the public address system or visually on screens in the event of an emergency. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairwell A just across the main hallway or stairwell B down the hallway past the elevators. If you have a mobility disability or cannot self-evacuate, please proceed to stairwell D or E for assistance by MTA staff or emergency personnel. An automated external defibrillator, AED, for use by trained personnel is in the main hallway just past the elevators. If you need assistance during an evacuation, please tell an MTA staff member or emergency personnel. Thank you and have a safe day.
Great. Ms. Contino, may we hear from public speakers?
Good morning and welcome to the February MTA Board Meeting's public comment session. Today we have 24 members of the public registered to speak. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you when you have 30 seconds left to conclude your remarks. The first speaker today will be Jean Ryan, followed by Christopher Greif.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm Jean Ryan, President of Disabled in Action of Metropolitan New York, DIA for short. I heard that the AAR app was improved and I have used it several times this week. I do not see any difference at all, but I do not use a screen reader. However, the app has the same problems that we've been having with it for years, and that is when the app books our Access-Ride trip, a screen pops up that says we are leaving at the time we wanted to be at our destination. If the Uber app were like this, heaven help us. People would be up in arms. Also, in trying to track the blue and white Maggie's vehicle that was coming to pick me up the other night at 7:07 p.m., the app was horribly off. I could not track the vehicle. I got a robocall at 6:58 telling me the vehicle would arrive in 14 minutes, but the vehicle did not come. Every minute, the app increased the time the vehicle would arrive by a minute. I was cold and outside. When the app told me the vehicle would arrive in 14 more minutes, the vehicle suddenly appeared at 7:23. The poor driver was filling out paperwork with pen and paper and had to call his base to say where he was, who he picked up, and where he was going, just like how it was in the 90s, more than 25 years ago, before we had digital technology and GPS. I think the app fix is like the emperor's new clothes, and I can't figure out why the MTA is saying it's better when it's actually worse for me and other people. This is another example of lack of transparency by the MTA. Tell us the truth, and if you do not know what is actually happening, then please do not call a press conference to announce something that is not true. Lastly, I think having NYC pay for all of Access-Ride is just the MTA's way of emphasizing that they never wanted it, and they still do not want Access-Ride.
Please conclude your remarks. Thank you. The next speaker will be Chris Greif, followed by Joseph Morales.
Good morning. I'm Christopher D. Grive, and I want to thank the MTA for the new customer centers, which they are brand new in Coney Island. I know we were all there. We all had a great time. And just to say that we have seen a lot of people loving it, to go in there to sign up for the card, and even sign up for, they want to choose the app or the card. But it'd be nice to see more information and more outreaching so people know that there is a new customer center in Brooklyn, one at Yankee Stadium, and the other one at Atlantic Barclay. If we can continue doing this, it will help encouraging a lot of people to know there are other ways and other options there as well. Also, just wanted to thank that with accessibility that we're continuing advocating, we still need to remember that every transportation, safety or not safety, we still need to work with MTA Police, NYPD, the security here in the building, and show courtesy and respect to any person. We might be upset, we might be frustrated, but we do need to continue advocating for everything. But the main part is love and peace and continuing. The issues we need to do this year is to work together as a team and continue working as a team. If we cannot work as a team, we cannot solve the problems, what's going on in New York. I want to thank the MTA and NYPD because I'm seeing that homeless are getting help. I'd like to thank NJ Bergens because ABC7 is showing what they've been doing during the nights. And I hope we can see this more in other boroughs and other near the Long Island and Metro North area. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Joseph Morales, followed by Sally Wolf.
Good morning, everyone. A few things I want to mention today. Transit equity. Judy mentioned at the New York City Transit Committee meeting earlier in the week that the MTA, despite having done work in equity areas, which Midori questioned her on, the MTA did not have a clear definition of equity areas, except for the fact that they prioritized work in Title VI areas, and Title VI is a federal law that really only defines equal access to transportation. And I must say the MTA has and is continuing to do work in areas with a lot of racial minorities and low-income individuals, such as forming the Select Bus service system, its bus network redesigns, and exploring subway extensions to places like Red Hook and Utica Avenue. However, the MTA should still have a definition of what equity areas are. That way people who, like Midori and others who are interested in these areas, can really understand what the MTA is prioritizing and looking for. And also, the MTA should continue being proactive, like how Jano mentioned at the meeting, to achieve more goals for including women and minority-owned businesses on projects earlier in the contracts. And let's not this may sound a little strange, but let's not overthink this too much. New York City, it's not like a lot of cities where you have low-income individuals on one side and higher-income individuals on another. You truly have a lot of different people from so many different ethnicities and so many different demographics living and traveling all over the place. So the best thing we could do is to continue to use our money and resources wisely to truly build as many connections as possible and make them as quality as possible, which is something the MTA does, should continue to do. There's always going to be a way to improve, but make sure that's the center of operations, and the MTA will achieve any equity goals it sets. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sally Wolf, who will be followed by Miriam Fisher.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Sally Wolf. I live in Flatiron. I'm here to reiterate the idea for masked cars or small sections of cars on subways and masked areas on buses. This costs almost nothing, and it could increase revenues by increasing ridership amongst those of us who have not yet returned to our pre-pandemic ridership, even though we want to. Each of us has our own stories. I'll again share that for me, I'm immunocompromised from metastatic breast cancer treatment. And I want to clarify, my concerns tie to being immunocompromised, an immunocompromised citizen of this city, not to COVID rates. There are many other germs too. But here's the thing, while I'm still personally so frustrated and so anxious, I was invited to Williamsburg this evening, and the only reason I hesitated to say yes was anxiety about taking the L during rush hour, which is insane. But overall, I'm no longer coming here to this meeting for myself. I'm an entrepreneur who doesn't have to commute daily, and when I need the trains, I generally can choose off-peak times, or I can wait for the next one if it feels too crowded. I am physically able to walk most places, including Memorial Sloan and Mount Sinai, even if it's 3 or 4 miles each way. I am privileged enough to be able to afford a cab or a private car if I need one. And like many other things, there's a spectrum for immunocompromised, and I am not the worst off. And yet, 6 months of coming here, I have heard so many others speak about the same reasonable concerns and desires and asks. Yet many of them don't share my privileges. They may have to commute twice a day during rush hour in bodies that are more immunocompromised than mine. And advocacy means we don't stop caring just when we have figured out how to make something that feels unjust work for us. When we stop when everyone feels comfortable. So I am asking you to care, just like I care, because not everyone feels comfortable. Mandates didn't work because people don't like losing anything, but selectively requiring people to mask, no one loses.
Please
We
conclude
only
your
win.
remarks.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
listening.
Our next speaker will be Miriam Fisher, followed by Sean Hill.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Last month, I was in the waiting room for an hour. I don't know why. I registered early, and I don't know if my testimony was heard, so I'm reiterating some of the points. Return to the subway is linked to safety, accessibility, reliability of elevators, and masks for people with disabilities, parents, people with strollers, visitors with luggage, deliveries, and seniors who are increasing. Elevators are not working on the average of 25 daily, or of the number that Mr. Davey had given us out of 297, which by my calculation with my fingers is actually 88%. I welcome the subway announcements of location of elevators and the platforms, but no notice of outages. I went to Grand Central on the number 7 for about a month. The elevator was boarded up, so staff knew it was out. I finally put it on Twitter with a photo, and the next time I was there, the elevator was working. People are stranded, often for hours, who don't have choices and options as most of us do. An MTA rep told me that announcements are not on the agenda. Let's put it on the agenda. Estimates of 500,000 potential riders with ambulatory disabilities and 1 million of varying disabilities. Here are your riders who would increase subway usage. No one currently on the MTA board with a disability who uses mass transit and knowledgeable about the needs and struggles of people with disabilities. There are several openings. And to reinstate the mask mandate to make it safer.
Please conclude your remarks.
Isn't over. Thank you.
Thank you.
For listening.
The next speaker will be Sean Hill, followed by Lisa Daglian.
Hello, my name is Sean Hill, and I'm representing the Harlem Neighborhood Block Association, which is a participant in a community transportation needs survey regarding the M35 bus. In the early 1980s, residents in the South Bronx, Queens, and Manhattan all had access to Randall's Island using the M34 and the BX21 buses that were replaced in 1995 by the M35. We need to recover this bus access to Randall's Island and reconnect these 3 great boroughs. We're asking the MTA to reimagine the M35 bus so that it will link subway stations in the South Bronx, Astoria, Queens with Manhattan. At the moment, while 4 million people visit Randall's Island every year, the M35 bus currently only averages 176 riders per day. A reimagined M35 bus would be a low-cost way to unite the 3 boroughs, provide accessible access to a world-class recreation site, open the door to more than 1,600 jobs on the island, and reduce the fleet of over 30 private buses that currently operate to ferry employees, guests, and visitors to the island. We want a tri-borough bus route that will provide accessible transportation to Randall's Island, community access to island jobs, and equitable access to healthy recreation opportunities. In short, we're asking the MTA to help the South Bronx, East Harlem, Astoria, Queens, and Randall's Island thrive together via a reimagined tri-borough bus route incorporating the M35 bus. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Lisa Daglian, followed by Michael Ring.
Daglian, the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. They say that money makes the world go around, but in our region, it's transit around which our world revolves. What time we leave for work, school, appointments, dinner, pretty much anything depends on how the trains and buses are running and what schedules look like. We've all heard or lived through horror stories of 17 minutes waits for the F train, or an hour until the next scheduled departure, or a bus that takes forever to show up. But things are looking up. Recent data shows near all-time high OTP and a 14% improvement in customer satisfaction since fall 22. That's significant progress from the darkest days of the pandemic. But that could all come crashing down if the MTA isn't set on stable financial footing once and for all. Those horror stories will be de rigueur, and riders will abandon the system like it's the 70s. We can't afford that. Reliable, recurring, and dedicated operating funding is critical so we don't see service cuts, exorbitant fare hikes, or layoffs. That will lead to delays and decline. Now that we're turning the corner, it's important to keep the positive trends and improvements heading in the right direction. Transit plays a key role in reducing congestion and air pollution, promoting economic growth, and providing access to opportunities. Transit's key to keeping our region moving, literally and economically, and it must be funded as the essential service that it is. The proposals put forth by Governor Hochul show she understands the importance of a healthy MTA to the region and riders who depend on it. They're a great starting point, and it's encouraging there's near universal agreement on the need to fund and support the MTA. We're extremely hopeful we'll see a positive outcome come April 1st. We'll continue to speak with our electeds about the importance of transit to riders. We'll advocate, agitate, beg, plead, and urge everyone with a voice and a vote to do the right thing and fund the MTA now and reliably and sustainably into the future. Our collective future depends on it. Yes, just one thing. Thank you, Danny. Good luck. Congratulations. Have a wonderful retirement.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Michael Ring, followed by Joe Rappaport.
Hiya. My name is Michael Ring. I'm speaking on behalf of Disabled in Action of Greater New York. And for those who need a verbal description of my appearance, I'm just a white guy wearing a hoodie. Over the past few weeks or months, there's been a lot of news about your customer satisfaction surveys, especially for Accessoride. Years ago, I was in a PhD program in sociology. I had 4 semesters where I studied how to create surveys and how to analyze the data. There's one thing that I taught my undergraduates was that garbage in and garbage out. These surveys that you're handing out are only being given to people who could get to the internet. People who ride Accessoride, many of them, because only 5% of us are using the app, many of them don't have access to the internet. So you're not getting the opinions of the Accessoride users, you're getting the opinions of the people who can complete that survey. So it's a very ableist way of collecting data. But you do have the data of how people on Accessoride are dealing with their lives. You do know how often a phone has to ring before it's picked up, or how long someone's on hold, or how many times they get put on hold, or how many times someone calls back a minute after they called because that first call was useless. You do know how many times someone is picked up more than 30 minutes late, and you do know how many times someone has to wait almost 30 minutes or ask for taxi reimbursement because the car didn't come at all. And in your piles of data, you do know how many times the car didn't come when they said it would come. There's lots of ways for you to see how Accessoride is working, but having an online survey isn't really getting you the information. You have the data. You can be transparent with it. The Department of Justice is asking you to be sharing this data, and it can be done. And you guys can do a lot better. The people who are riding Accessoride can get better service. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Joe Rappaport, who will be followed by John Mayer.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Joe Rappaport from the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. First, I want to talk, and other people have too, about the manipulation of the facts about accessory ride performance at an MTA news conference a few weeks ago. My colleague Kara Leibowitz will go into more detail, but this was an extraordinary display of chutzpah by the MTA, and that's not a compliment. I've never seen as blatant an attempt to manipulate and deceive the public by the MTA in years. Your own data show that accessory ride service is failing. The Department of Justice called you on it. Your riders have too. A news conference doesn't change a thing. Second, we do want the MTA, a state authority, to do a better job when it comes to accessory ride. We want the MTA, a state authority, to fully fund accessory ride so it actually works for New Yorkers. And we know it's within the power of the MTA, a state authority, to improve accessory ride service using modern-day technology like GPS to offer on-demand rides and better service in general. I don't know the genesis of the proposal to offload the funding of paratransit to the city, but I do know that the governor wouldn't be making this proposal without the MTA's okay. Paratransit is a core function of transit authorities. It's federally mandated. You're going into your 4th decade running it. You can't pretend it's someone else's, that's something separate that should be someone else's responsibility to fund, letting you blame the city if the service continues to fail. You want more money from the city for transit, make your argument. But don't try to fob off your funding obligations for the service that carries disabled New Yorkers onto another entity with much more limited options when it comes to raising money. Finally, masks. I ride transit regularly. We know there are police officers on the platform. We know how to apply for a half-fare card. We hear nothing about masks or see anything about masks. At the very least, make it clear that masks are a smart idea that will protect your riders.
Please conclude your remarks. Thank you. The next speaker will be John Mayer, who will be followed by Rachel Foss.
Hello, good morning. My name is John Meyer, and I'm speaking today as a board member of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. The recent incident in East Palestine, Ohio, has made it clear that the railroad industry too often is operating outdated equipment and under inadequate rules for safety and pollution emissions. Everyone has now seen that railroads operating without sensible controls and modern equipment are creating health risks and other harms for residents, workers, and environment. A less explosive but still harmful example of the use of outdated technology is happening every day in New York City within the MTA system. The Long Island Railroad and its freight rail concessionaire, the New York and Atlantic Railway, are operating noisy, high-polluting Tier 0 locomotives from the early 1970s, even though you have $20 million in Comptroller's contract DR 36644 to repower them to modern Tier 4 standards. This would make existing switcher locomotives pollute 95 to 99% less, be 75 to 85% less noisy, use up to 40% less fuel, and greatly increase their tractive power. New York says it's a clean climate leader. However, the MTA, as a New York State authority, has failed to repower any of these locomotives to Tier 4 emissions, even as an increasing number of companies offer the technology to accomplish this. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey did this as far back as 2015. We asked the MTA to stop the harms to families and communities, stop contributing the NOx equivalent of the emissions of 1 million cars from your right-of-way. Issue an RFP for Tier 4 switch duty cycle repower for these outmoded locomotive fleets that operate within your system. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Rachel Foss, who will be followed by Alita Dupree.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Foss, and I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for reInvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable New York government, including authorities like the MTA. With the release of the updated financial plan today, we would like to continue to ask the governor and the legislature to avert the MTA's fiscal crisis in this operating budget, and to highlight why congestion pricing is still essential for the MTA's capital plan, which includes billions in basic maintenance that helps keep the trains and buses running. We agree the MTA's fiscal cliff is real, and we asked in our budget testimony to the state legislature for the governor to make good on the state's historic funding commitments by no longer rating the Transportation Operating Assistance Fund for the state's 18B program contribution. This would be $175 million more a year for the MTA, increasing the New York State's 18B contributions to adjust for inflation. This would be another $125 million a year for the MTA, and adjusting the payroll mobility tax make whole payments for inflation, another $200 million for the MTA. Together, these contributions would add more than $500 million to the MTA's operating budget this year. And going forward, these funds should continue to grow to adjust for inflation. On the capital plan, congestion pricing remains essential and should not be rated for the operating budget. To date, only $9.7 billion of the $55 billion plan has been received by the MTA. This is 17%, largely from federal funds. My testimony, which is on our website, reinventalbany.org, and was sent to the board members, has some charts to show why the capital plan is currently lagging and some of our concerns about why congestion pricing is essential if we want to make important progress on this capital plan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Alita Dupree, followed by Bruce Hain.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Jano Lieber and members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. It's good to be back with you, hopefully in person soon. I keep saying it. The weather has not been friendly to flying. I've been looking at ADA reports. We got 99 of the 100 key stations done. And the 68th Street is a station that's very close to me, having used it a lot in my younger days with friends going to and from school. So hopefully we can get that done soon. And I reiterate to you that I am simply an ordinary user of the subway and other systems of public transportation. And I seek to bring you positive energy. I have some Grand Central Terminal for you here again. Can't get enough of Grand Central Terminal. And I hope to get to see Grand Central Madison. That's going to be tops on my agenda. And I'll be saying you can never have enough Grand Central Madison. I have a fear of escalators, so I might be using that elevator. So we want to make sure the elevators are running. And I did see in the agenda book that we're doing very well with our elevators. Grand Central has plus 99%. So I'm letting you know that elevators are very important to me. And even though I can climb stairs, there are many who can't. And if I'm having a bad day, it's nice to have them there. Hopefully I'll get on the escalator and prove that I can do it. But how do we build the best subway that we have? I mean, this is the greatest transportation system the world has ever known. And I miss it, and I'm looking forward to using it. So I look forward to your discussion today. And thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Bruce Hain, who will be followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Excuse me. Good morning. Just as an anecdotal part, which you should give me 30 extra seconds for, this morning I went to Sutphin Boulevard and stuck my half-fare card in the machine, and it ate it. I was running to get to the subway. I wanted to do this. Well, I better shut up. Anyway, there was nobody there, but it doesn't matter because you can't change it now. There wasn't anyone, and they couldn't have changed it either. So, just an anecdote. This guy mentioning the East Palestine business, this is what you're up against. It is a cabal, the freight carrier, railroad engineering, FRA revolving door cabal. You've got Texas Central. Remember Texas Central, the guy is tired of the grind of flying back and forth between Houston and Dallas. He wants a railroad. So the FRA designs the railroad for them, you know, and they put fraudulent stuff in those. They have, you have to have a 40-foot wall to have passenger trains and freight trains share the tracks because the FRA is run by the freight carriers, and they do make a lot of money, but it doesn't look like a racket. Not a trace of red. All right, but I wanted to say, passengers are rightfully angry about the schedules, but the Long Island Railroad and its president are stuck with the cards they've been dealt. They have to run twice as many trains into Manhattan, and the only solution for it is the Rockaway Beach branch. And you can't use the Rockaway Beach branch unless you have a flyover on the east side of Jamaica Station.
Please conclude your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Charlton D'Souza, followed by Andrew Sparberg.
Good morning, everyone. Charlton D'Souza from Passengers United. And we are outraged with the Long Island Railroad schedule. So there used to be 7 trains between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. from Jamaica to Atlantic Terminal. Now there's only 4 trains. So there's a 3-train elimination under the new schedule starting on February 27th. Do you know how many angry phone calls I've gotten from Long Island Railroad commuters chewing me out about the schedules? I am outraged. The Long Island commuters who use the railroad are outraged. Mr. Chairman, I beg you, you have to have a special pick in like 2 weeks for the conductors because they need more trains. Y'all should have 3 more trains added to the Atlantic Terminal schedule because a lot of people who work on Wall Street, they don't want to go up those long escalators at Grand Central only to take the 4, 5, and 6. They want to go via Brooklyn because it's easier to access the subway. So that's that. And then what happens if Grand Central breaks down and Penn Station breaks down? That's going to be another epic mess. So the only good thing about the schedules is the reverse peak. I'll give you all credit for that. But Queens Village commuters and Hollis commuters, we still have hourly service on weekdays. We're not getting any new service. The only service we're getting is late night and weekends. So you guys have to do right. Listen to the commuters. We all spoke to you in June. All of us did. We gave you suggestions. You guys did not take those suggestions wisely. So I know, Mr. Chairman, you don't like it when I give you bad news, but please listen to us. We're your commuters. We pay hundreds of dollars to use the railroad. All of us. That's all we're asking for. Thank you. And also, I want to say with New York City Transit, I did not agree with the report on WABC TV because I ride the subways. We're getting reports every day on Twitter of homeless individuals sleeping on the subway seats, defecating on trains like this morning on a Q train. So the subways are still not safe. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. The next speaker is Andrew Sparberg, followed by Jesse Figueroa.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Andrew Sparberg. I'm a retired Long Island Railroad manager. I'm now a transportation historian, a published author, and an adjunct instructor at CUNY. And I'm still a regular subway and Long Island Railroad rider. The opening of Grand Central is a momentous event for the Long Island Railroad, and next week's full schedule will be the real test. Let me immediately segue to my specific request. Both the Long Island and Metro North need to resume issuing traditional hard copy branch timetables, as was the case before the COVID pandemic. Because of the many Long Island Railroad schedule changes because of Grand Central, a paper timetable will make it easier to follow the new schedules. And the paper timetables will allow both railroads and the MTA to provide information to people who do not carry a smartphone. For example, potential Jamaica transfer opportunities could be displayed easily, and they're not displayed on the new timetables because the traditional 2-train connections are disappearing with the new stop and drop service pattern. Paper timetables will also make it easier for the MTA to publicize new service opportunities between Long Island and Metro North territory, such as travelers to Yankee Stadium from Long Island and travelers between the Metro North stations and Citi Field, Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens. No doubt there are many other potential combinations that could go in a paper timetable. Sometimes a smartphone just doesn't work that well, especially when one is traveling in a hurry. Keep in mind that at Penn Station, New Jersey Transit still issues traditional paper timetables. STEPTA, the Philadelphia area commuter train operator, has not abandoned paper timetables either. It's time for Long Island Metro North to go back to paper timetables as well to enhance the usefulness of the new Long Island Railroad service in and out of Grand Central. Please consider my request, and thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jesse Figueroa, followed by Lucy Coteam.
Hi, guys. Can y'all see me? Can y'all hear me well?
Please go ahead.
Hi. It may be a little bit longer than 2 minutes the first time, but I have something to get out my chest. So here it is. And I have it written down. Dear Mr. Chairman, this week's back-to-back 12-9s have been horrific. Someone had the nerve to post a gruesome picture of the deceased 15-year-old on the Williamsburg Bridge after he was fatally struck by that train. I reported and blocked the individual's Instagram page at Joe69. He got it from a crew member involved in the incident train and was shared to that individual's Instagram. I'm also addressing today that we, the people, demand that subway surfing ends now, and we need the police to put undercover officers on the beat. And also, I received complaints from one of my anonymous sources saying that Gun Hill Depot buses are filthy, meaning trash on all its buses. It's been a serious problem. And also people smoking weed on board. I recommend that no eating, no drinking, to include alcoholic beverages, signs to be added to the existing no littering, no smoking, no spinning, no speakerphone calls need to be posted system-wide. We commute daily and we don't need to see any rodents in our fleet, and we need the police to beef up on patrols to catch would-be fare evaders and all that. I'm sorry for being very upset with these serious problems, but these such problems must end now. And oh yeah, I'm also a disabled veteran, and homelessness is on the rise. We got homeless vets too, so please help them. Thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Lucy Coteam, followed by Janine Hayes.
Hi, good morning. I speak again in opposition to congestion pricing. If you live in the congestion pricing zone, you have to pay just to return to your home. This is due to an accident of where you live. When you chose where to live, for instance, in Chinatown or the Lower East Side, you never imagined that you would have to pay when you returned from your job or family visit, or that family members or a friend would pay extra to visit you when they live outside the city. The story that is told is that people with cars are wealthier. Well, first, this is irrelevant. If you need to use a car, your level of wealth is not the relevant information. Second, the majority of people I see driving are Black and brown people. I doubt that all of these people consider themselves wealthy New Yorkers. These are the working people who make the city run. They are bus drivers, MTA workers, plumbers, construction workers, hospital workers, carpenters, film crews, food delivery workers, cab drivers, etc. Many are barely surviving financially as it is, and imposing congestion pricing on them is another tax on the working people of New York. How many taxes can the MTA impose on the workers and citizens of New York City? There's already a tax included on utility bills and in every taxi ride. The MTA needs to find another way. You have heard from many, many people the reasons they cannot take the subway. Listen to them and not the anti-car gang that is so very, very loud and inconsiderate of the needs of other people. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Janine Hayes, followed by Tasha Labors.
Hello, my name is Janine Hayes. I'm a business owner, author, and New York resident. My husband and I were some of the first New Yorkers to develop COVID-19 in early 2020. The virus nearly killed my husband, who developed double pneumonia and who still has residual issues, and it left me with long COVID, a condition where I suffer from a range of chronic health conditions, from high blood pressure to allergy attacks that can lead to anaphylaxis. Over the past 3 years living with long COVID, I have had to learn how to walk, eat, go to the bathroom, and even speak again. I continue with physical therapy daily, and although I'm 44, my body now operates like it's 30 to 40 years older. The desire to put the pandemic behind us is understandable, but the drive to do so before it is safe, while thousands are dying weekly and thousands more are developing long COVID, is unconscionable. Masks have been proven to reduce transmission. Studies have shown that they are incredibly effective at preventing people from contracting the virus and potentially developing long COVID, which recent studies show affects 1 out of 5 people who contract the virus. Public transportation is one of the most crucial battlegrounds of the fight against COVID. As a place where thousands gather every day in close quarters, it's critical that all community members can travel safely. We know how to curb outbreaks. We know how to keep people safe, and masks are an important part of our toolkit to do so. To prevent the spread of the virus, to keep our communities safe, to protect small business owners like myself, and to ensure that we are not aiding and expanding the secondary pandemic of long COVID, I ask the MTA to reinstate the mask mandate on public transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Tasha Rebors, followed by Jason Anthony.
Good morning. My name is Tasha Leribors. I work for Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York. As an Access-a-Ride user and someone who reaches out to a lot of community centers, I'm having trouble seeing the progress you speak of in terms of Access-a-Ride. During your press conference, you invited blue and white vehicle users. However, you didn't invite anyone who uses broker service, which is a service I use frequently. We both know broker service has a long way to go in terms of improvement. Another quick thing I will mention is Omni. I have been going to multiple community centers, and oftentimes the people, seniors especially, they have absolutely no clue what Omni is. They have never heard of it. They are afraid of losing their reduced fare Metro cards. As I said, even though I've explained it to them, they have no clue. You need to reach out to the community centers. Do not neglect the seniors. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jason Anthony, who will be followed by Thareem Barnett.
Good morning, Kate, and good morning, Jano, and good morning to all the board members, and I hope that they all are paying attention. Jason Anthony here as every month. I'm coming here to do some fact-checking this month. As you guys are pretty aware, this week we had yet again a 15-year-old being on top of the J train on the Williamsburg Bridge doing subway surfing. It is pretty alarming, and I hope that Neil, as a veteran that he is, should be aware that this, I've been mentioning it for quite some time, and teenagers shouldn't doing this. Yesterday, we had a union leader calling the head of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority idiot. That's being disrespectful, right, John?
Was it me?
No. It wasn't you, John. No. But this person did it in a press conference. That is not being respectful in a public setting. But I'm gonna do fact checking now. I've been doing fact checking always, and when it comes to congestion pricing, I'm gonna do it here and I'm gonna do it across the Hudson because New Jersey is being very selfish and they store their equipment in our backyard. And it's time that New Jersey pay their fair share in our backyard. So I'll see you guys next month.
Thank you. All right, the next speaker is going to be Thareem Barnett, followed by Murray Bowden.
Hi, my name is Thareem Barnett. I'm an MTA writer. I want to request that the MTA prioritize the health of the MTA's consumers and renew the mask mandate for public transit in the midst of continuing high COVID-19 transmission. It makes public transit inaccessible to many for there not to be a mandate. And when there was a mandate, when the MTA had signage and announcements, offered free masks to encourage proper mask wearing, there was higher compliance. With the reversal of that decision, there even seemed to be time and money spent on a campaign of signage promoting not wearing a mask or you do you. Many people, so many people rely on the MTA to carry out their daily lives, myself included. Any of us could get COVID, especially people who are at high risk, such as those who are immunocompromised, disabled, sick, or elderly. It feels unacceptable to me to make public transit inaccessible, especially for the most vulnerable among us. And especially since public transit is the most financially accessible option, it adds an additional burden to those who cannot afford to commute by car. Then they're having to decide with tending, risking a transmission of COVID-19. This isn't good for individuals, not good for the city, it's not good for the environment. We're still in the midst of this pandemic. The week of February 18th, at least 2,883 people, 38 people died of COVID nationally, and at least 113,245 people have died from COVID in the US. I'm tripping over this number so large, even though we're used to hearing these numbers, people are still dying. We're still losing people, and many New Yorkers are struggling with long COVID, including someone on this meeting. Any of us could end up with the chronic complications of long COVID, and mask mandates on public transit could be a way of mitigating that risk. Studies show that masks are a critical tool to reduce COVID-19 transmission, and they're most effective when everyone wears one. Please reinstate the mask mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Murray Bowden, followed by Jasmine Smith. Murray, you're muted.
Unmute. Thank you.
There you
go. Okay. On Monday, I was at 4 meetings, and I had some problems. I'll be 90 in June, and things don't work the way they should do. And it's not always obvious. I was assisted by all kinds of people within the building. Somebody held a door, and going through the revolving door, they let me go through, and they said, "We'll push it for you." Going upstairs, all kinds of people helped me. Now, I've been to these meetings for a number of years, and I had a lot of things to say. But when everybody was so helpful, I have to take the time to thank all of those people on the ground. Last week, I went to the new Madison station underneath Grand Central, and to take a look at people. People helped me. I couldn't figure out how to get there. They were helpful. I went to a meeting at the Treasury building. I took Metro North and the subway. I didn't know how to use the Metro cards. It's been so long, didn't work. Somebody helped me. Somebody got me on the right train. I've said a lot of things about the MTA over the years and had a lot of suggestions. The opposite side of that is when you do something right, thank you. You're paying attention in a way that's very well done. And I'm sorry, I can't remember all the things I need to say, but to all those people at the various levels, all over the system, Metro North, MTA, thank you. See you next time.
Thank you. As a reminder to all of our speakers, speakers shall address their remarks to the chair and shall not make personal, impertinent, insulting, or slanderous statements about any member of the MTA board or staff or any other members of the public. To finish up our speakers today, the next speaker will be Jasmine Smith, followed by KK Graham.
Hello, good morning. My name is Jasmine Smith. I'm a regular MTA user, and I'm a concerned New Yorker and a former contact tracer. I would like to also voice my support and solidarity with others before about reinstating the mask mandate on public transportation. COVID is still very much a threat. There are still people dying every day, and there are also people becoming disabled and having very unfortunate medical instances after their acute COVID infections. Even if some people might feel initially that COVID is just a cold, if you look at the news these days, whether it's NBC, the Today Show, PBS, the Associated Press, there's more and more mainstream media reporting on things like how COVID can affect your heart, your blood vessels, cause inflammation. It's been tied to an astronomical rise in heart attacks, strokes, and other bad cardiac instances in relatively young people. It is truly nothing to play with. When we don't have a mask mandate in public spaces, it is not safe for those who are disabled, for those who are vulnerable, and also many who are able-bodied today are ignorant of what COVID can do to them long term. We need to take this virus seriously. It is not over. An investment in safe public transit now is going to pay off in huge dividends in the future. Please reinstate a mask mandate and give out free, high quality N95 or better to New Yorkers. We deserve it and we need it. Public transit should be safe for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Today's final speaker will be KK Graham.
Hello, thank you. My name is KK Graham. I'm in Brooklyn, New York on Canarsie and Lenape land. I am speaking with regards to masking on the subways. I'm a chronically ill person who contracted COVID, though I took many precautions, but I could not avoid the subway. I request that the MTA continues to require masks. They aid in the reduction of transmission of COVID and other illnesses, whether bacterial or viral, droplet or airborne. As many are in extremely close quarters, not masking encourages the spread of illnesses that make it difficult for New Yorkers to attend class, work, and simply live fulfilling lives. I would hope the MTA would strive for happier and healthier riders in the long run. And if I have to speak in solely financial terms, severely ill or dead riders are not paying riders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chair Lieber, this concludes the public comment session.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you always for handling this portion of our program so effectively. So I need to acknowledge that once in a while. Thank you. Thank you to everybody for joining this month's meeting of the MTA Board, and thank you to all of our public speakers. We continue to have robust debates from the podium, and we welcome it. As I'll describe today, the MTA is making real progress on many of the most important issues, especially the push for long-term solutions to our fiscal challenges, the necessity that we deliver top-tier service, that we address issues of crime and safety in the subway system especially, and the challenge of knocking out major projects and the entire transformational MTA capital program. Let me start with our finances. We're in the midst of the legislative session in Albany, where MTA's financial situation is very much at the top of the agenda. In a little while, Kevin Willens, our CFO, is going to discuss the February financial plan, which has been updated from November to reflect Governor Hochul's executive budget proposal. That was what we were waiting for when we adopted our budget a couple of months ago. But I need to make clear that we're not voting on anything today. There's no board action required given the procedural posture that we're in, waiting for Albany. But I have to say that if approved, Governor Hochul's budget will certainly have a major and very, very positive impact on the MTA. We worked on the proposal with her team for weeks, and in my view, this is a great plan. The governor has refused to kick the can down the road any longer. And instead, she's addressing the MTA fiscal cliff head on, using a balanced approach, while also supporting the top priorities that this board has set out, which is preserving safe and frequent subway service, as well as bus and commuter rail service, as well as, of course, what we believe to be an improving paratransit operation. The first element of the governor's strategy is to get us at the MTA to generate savings ourselves, $400 million in cost efficiencies, belt tightening, without any service cuts, plus an additional $100 million that we are being asked to raise with a moderate fare and toll increase. We're actually starting the public process now to put the MTA in a position to implement a toll hike, not an action on the transit fare, I emphasize, just tolls for now, but we need to take some steps under the State Administrative Procedures Act to be ready on the toll front in case that is indeed part of the final New York State budget. But the rest of the money comes from a few things which I'll tick off. Moderate adjustment to the existing payroll mobility tax that will only affect the top 5% of companies in terms of size and payroll, and that will raise $800 million a year starting in 2024. This is an idea that has, in a man bites dog moment, the trade association representing the big New York employers who will pay 80% of the tax, those are the New York City big companies, has actually said that she believes this is a good idea and a responsible approach. How often does that happen, that the industry potentially being asked to pay a little bit more in taxes says, good idea? That's what happened. We're also, as part of the plan, the governor has asked for the legislature to agree with her that it's time to realign some of the outdated cost-sharing arrangements with the City of New York on Paratransit and on the school bus and subway pass program. I know it is controversial even among this board, but that is an important element as well. There is in the plan, there's a near-term one-time infusion of state general fund resources to address this year, the 2023 deficit. It's the fiscal and calendar year that the MTA is already in. And longer term, she has proposed, and this is a huge issue that has gotten some maybe less attention than it warrants, she has proposed to dedicate a significant portion of future casino taxes and revenues to mass transit. That shows her prioritization of mass transit and of what the MTA needs to accomplish. I was in Albany last week, and I can tell you from my meetings with legislative leadership that there's real momentum right now. Many members are focusing on transit. There's a robust discussion that's unfolding on all sides, and we appreciate that there is enthusiasm and interest and a range of views, like in any major issue that comes to the legislature. But even though things are headed, I believe, in a positive direction after the governor's budget, we have to be prepared for any and all outcomes. For example, unfortunately, we have to be prepared if, God forbid, the legislature does not follow Governor Hochul's lead and we are forced to significantly cut service. Accordingly, I've asked our operations planning teams to update the plan that we developed during the pandemic to deal with this scenario if, as I said, in a downside case that I hope will not come to pass, in case the governor's plan is rejected or significantly scaled back. But cutting service is obviously the last thing we want to do, especially at a time when the operating agencies, New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, are setting records for on-time performance and customer satisfaction. January was one of the best months on record for the subways, with weekday on-time performance of almost 86%, the highest in 10 years. 10 years. Even weekend on-time performance is north of 87%, second only to February 2020 at the outset of the COVID pandemic. And overall service delivered was over 96%, just a hair's breadth short of the 2019 average of 96.6%. So thanks to the amazing team at Subways and Rich's leadership at New York City Transit in general, we're making a lot of progress on getting the system that we all want and expect back in action. On buses, service delivery speeds, on-time performance, the metrics are all heading in the right direction, led by the Bronx, as you heard earlier this week, where the local bus network redesign has had real positive impact on speeds and overall performance. And the commuter railroads, wow. The railroads have been fantastic. After a record-breaking 96% OTP in 2022, LIRR had its best January ever. Metro North was even stronger in January, at 98.3%. So when you're getting two commuter railroads that are hovering around 98% on-time performance, we're really firing on all cylinders. And I just got a call out to the two gentlemen sitting over there, Mr. Free and Mr. Vonashek, who, under Kathy Rinaldi's leadership, make those trains run every day. Well done to your teams. And we have unprecedented customer satisfaction. I know we're starting to debate a little bit these issues as we heard today, but we do have unprecedented customer satisfaction with the Accessorized Paratransit service. On-time performance for primary service, that's the blue and white vans, increased from 90% in September 2021 to 98% in January of 2023. And the broker service, this is the for-hire vehicles, which we used to call liveries, that represent 70% of our total paratransit rides, has moved up to 95%. I'm never going to say we're satisfied, but there is significant progress. And this performance has been reflected in our customer surveys. Satisfaction in our January Pulse survey hit an all-time high of 76%. I respect the point that maybe we got to look at the methodology of the surveys to make sure we're capturing everybody. It's a fair point. But the movement has been so great that you have to take notice of that positive trend, because in the not-so-distant fall of 2021, 18 months ago, only 44%, using the same methodology, said that they were satisfied. That number's moved to 76%, and you need to recognize and credit the folks who made that happen. In fact, customer satisfaction across the entire MTA is on the upswing. You heard about the gains in our large biannual survey on Tuesday. Shanifa presented at some length about that. Based on, this is the big biannual survey, 65,000 responses. Metro North satisfaction, 89%. Long Island Railroad, 81%. Buses up 64%. Subway jumped 6 points, more than 10% improvement over the spring survey, the previous spring survey, to 54%. Now, 54% is not where Rich Davey has set the goal of the North Star of 70%. We're all accustomed to hearing about it. But you know, one point to underscore is these surveys were taken in the fall before the impact of the governor and the mayor's move on subway safety. And we know from the Pulse surveys, which were more frequent, albeit smaller survey populations, that has had a tremendous impact on the perception of safety and service in the system. That we went in a single month from 40% of the people saying they felt safe or very safe to 60%. So I think that even the positive news you heard in the biannual survey that Shanifa presented may understate just how much we have moved in a positive direction, customer perception. You may also have seen that also on the customer service front, we have opened those customer service centers at 3 subway stations. Thank you, Christopher D. Greif, for pointing that out. We are on path to open 12 more this year, and the station agents are coming out of the booths. There is a lot of very positive movement. We want the MTA to continue to evolve and improve on customer satisfaction and customer service. Part of that is safety. The COPS Camera and Care program has been underway for almost 4 months, and don't miss this. Those 4 months have been the safest 4 months in the New York City subway system on record, with the exception of the very height of COVID when basically nobody was riding. This is the best 4 months since they've been keeping those records going back 2 decades. Not to be overlooked, this is a program that has really made a difference. Focusing just on 2023, this year, overall major crime in the subways is down 20% versus the prior year. A huge shout out to the governor and the mayor for teaming up with the MTA to turn things around. They did it fast. They did it with an aggressive program that has had immediate impact. And passengers are noticing. I just made that reference to how much passenger safety perception has improved in just a few short months, and it's real. Now we're preparing literally within days to begin full service on Grand Central Madison and the new Long Island Railroad timetable. That timetable adds 271 Long Island Railroad trains per day to boost our system-wide. I'm not even sure that's the right number. I'm going to go check that. 41% increase in services is what we're getting, and we're having over 900 trains a day. And it is the largest service increase in Long Island Railroad history on a percentage basis, on raw service basis. Kathy is going to go through this. We have to make sure, there are going to be bumps in the road as people get accustomed to the new service and the new schedule. Everybody has the train that they're accustomed to. There will be more changes in Jamaica, but I think of that, think of all of us who ride the subway. This is an opportunity for people to get much more service, because at the rush hour in Jamaica, those trains are going to be running through at about the pace of the Lexington Avenue subway. So people can take any train, get to Jamaica, and they're into the city very, very quickly if that's what they want. Listen, with Grand Central Madison's completion, third track, mainline double track, $15 billion of investment in the last couple of years, we're able to offer much, much more service, more convenience, more options, more connectivity. I always say bringing Long Island Railroad and the city closer is good for everybody. It is good for New York City businesses that are trying to get workforce to come back to work in some cases. It's good for the low and moderate income workers who depend on those activities in the center of our central business district to support restaurants and retail and theater and culture. And it's really good for Long Island businesses. Let this not be overlooked. If you're a Long Island business, for the first time starting next week, you get to recruit people from the full footprint of the region. Before, there was no the mass transit reverse peak commuting service wasn't there for Long Island businesses. It was very infrequent in the peak because all the capacity in the tunnels was inbound into the city. Now it can go the other way, and that's going to give Long Island businesses a huge shot in the arm. The whole thing is a shot in the arm for the regional economy, and we're thrilled to begin putting it in place. I'm also proud to announce the next batch of subway stations that we're targeting for full ADA accessibility. It's no secret that the current capital program includes as many new ADA stations as the last few capital programs combined. We've already got 34 stations in construction. There's 67 total included in the current capital program. My standard line is that I want the subway map to be the same for people with disabilities or people with strollers and people with mobility issues in general. We want them to have the same subway map as everybody else. Thanks to the $5 billion investment in the current capital program, it's really starting to happen. Now, next month, we're going to issue a request, an RFQ for another 17 stations, which are highlighted here on the slide, and they stretch across the 5 boroughs. 12 of these stations are set to be completed by the end of this year. Kudos to Jamie Torres-Springer, and the rest of the team at the MTA C&D, which is really getting its groove on knocking out ADA stations. You saw, I thought, a fabulous presentation earlier this week on what the construction complexities and the planning complexities. But notwithstanding that, we are moving ADA accessibility to the top of the agenda. We've done that, and we're knocking out the project. This is super important for all New Yorkers. Finally, I want to address a couple staffing changes. Danny, everybody loves Danny. Can we just say it? And there are very few people. Danny's retiring after 3 decades at the agency. You know, we're going to say it many times in many ways, but Danny, thank you for everything you have devoted to MTA, everything you've given MTA, not just your work, but your spirit, problem solving, teamwork, responsibility, a sense of ethics in all you do, and leadership on not just maintaining our bridges and tunnels, but also timely addressing, complicated new issues like toll evasion, which you led on when maybe it had not been getting enough attention. So we're just so honored to have worked with you. Danny started out as a bridge and tunnel officer. He worked his way up the entire ranks of that great historic agency and has done an amazing job as president. So again, there'll be more celebration, there'll be more cakes, there'll be more cards, but just here at the board meeting, and I know on behalf of all of our board members, thank you and Godspeed. Somewhere around here is Kathy Sheridan. Kathy, stand. If you would just, Kathy is the Chief of Staff at MTA Construction Development, but in her prior life, she was a long-tenured chief engineer at State DOT, worked at the Thruway Authority, the Erie Canal Corporation. She is a really expert highway and bridge engineer, and Kathy's agreed to take the reins as interim president, and that collaboration and transition has already gotten underway. As part of what's going on at Bridges and Tunnels at this moment, staff-wise, I'm really thrilled to announce, I think folks know, that Allison DiSereno, who is a super executive who has been at MTA headquarters for some time, has agreed to move back to MTA Bridges and Tunnels and to function as the Chief Operating Officer. Allison, is Allison in the room? No, but we incredible first-class professional who's going to be there to support Kathy and long-term at Bridges and Tunnels. So with that, I just want to thank again the board members who have been so supportive as we have marched through the process of putting our budget together and framing what has ultimately become a strong collaboration with the governor's office to solve the MTA fiscal cliff, and turn it over to CFO Kevin Willens for a few more details on that. Kevin.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. On Tuesday, I gave an update to the Finance Committee on our budget and financial plan. The February financial plan itself is a technical update to our November plan and is available on our website, but essentially is unchanged in terms of all the major assumptions around revenues, expenses, ridership, and so forth. With the committee, I reviewed the governor's executive budget proposal and how, in combination with MTA actions, would balance the MTA's budget through 2026 and beyond. But I also warned the committee that we'll need to come back to the board in April to begin other deficit-cutting efforts if the plan does not move forward at the levels proposed. So let's walk through some of the highlights. If you remember, in November, we brought to the board a plan that we called a responsible fiscal path, but one that required first MTA to do significant belt tightening to reduce the almost $2.6 to $3 billion deficits we were projecting down to the lower numbers you see here on the bar charts. For example, we've lowered our debt costs to 15% of the budget through at least 2026. A nod to David Jones for keeping us diligent on this. But second, this plan came with an assumption that our governmental partners would need to provide additional funds starting in 2023. $600 million this year and $1.2 billion per year of recurring needs starting in 24. In December, the board approved our budget sending a strong signal to our stakeholders. This pie chart illustrates how we reduced the 2024 deficit, which was originally projected at 2.8 billion, down to $1.2 billion remaining gap in the red. You see a mixture of MTA actions, from 400 million of operating efficiencies to 100 million from just a small incremental increase in fares and tolls above the 4% base, to spreading out the benefit of the federal COVID aid, to also then eliminating the deficit borrowing that otherwise, if we just kick the can, we'd have to use and then be saddled with about 200 million of debt service costs. So note that the $1.2 billion annual gap you see there on the left would have been 1.7 billion without the operating efficiencies that we've been hard at work on putting in place, and the additional 100 million we've asked from riders. So what happened with the governor's proposal? That's this chart. Notice the red's gone, filled with bright green. Essentially it eliminates the budget gap with 800 million of additional funding through the PMT, 500 million additional funding requests from the city. These amounts would not only eliminate that gap, but also provide MTA with additional funds to add to our safety and fare collection efforts. On top of this, there's 300 million in upfront state funds to help close the 23 gap. And additionally, the governor's proposal, as Jano mentioned, dedicates future downstate casino license fees and revenues to MTA, which we've projected will provide an additional 450 million a year in 2026. And this revenue coming on stream later is important because as we project slightly higher gaps in the out years, it'll cover those gaps, providing MTA with sustainable financial stability. So I know since the governor's proposal, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the components of the new revenue sources. So here's the economics. The top bar shows the share of all MTA's dedicated taxes and subsidies, everything that we receive, split out between New York City and the rest of the MTA region, including the governor's proposal. The bottom bar shows the relative size of the budget shortfalls that need to be funded between the in-city transit services and the commuter rails. The bottom line, the sources and uses line up. The funding between the city and the suburbs are almost an exact proportion to the operating deficits of in-city versus commuter railroads. I believe this illustrates the fair balance of the proposal. So, but as good news as the governor's proposal is, we do continue to work on our contingency plans. Layoffs, fare increases, higher fare increases, and service cuts if her proposal is not enacted into law. As this chart illustrates, there are long lead times to put in place these alternatives, particularly if we need to generate $1.2 billion plus a year on our own, up and above the 400 million in efficiencies that we talked about. So when you look at the lead times, and basically what this chart shows is we need to get started. We would need to get started early in 23 to start putting the savings in place for 24 and beyond, when our resources would run out without the new revenue stream. So based on this, I will come back to the board in April to begin deficit cutting efforts if the proposal doesn't move forward. Make no mistake about it, the governor's proposal is great news for MTA. It addresses our needs on a balanced and sustainable basis. That said, our financial future remains uncertain for another 40 days until it is adopted in the state budget.
Thank you, Kevin. All right. I think it's appropriate at this point to give board members an opportunity to comment if they wish. Chairman of the Finance Committee, Mr. Zuckerman, then followed by Mr. Albert, Mr. Bringerman. Who else wants to get in line? Anybody? Mr. Solomon? Okay. Mr. Zuckerman.
Thank you, sir. For those of you who skipped the main event on Tuesday, which was the Finance Committee, I always put on a fun little show. We'll give a little facsimile of that conversation then, with the same due respect and thoughtfulness that I thought we all expressed in that meeting. We're really lucky to have Kevin. That was a very clear presentation, and thank you. So I got 4 things I'd like to say, if you don't mind. An oft-mentioned comment I've had here, I've been on this board since the middle of 14, is that someone has to pay. We've had gaps in the budget before, nothing like this, but someone's got to pay. The system's got to work. We've got to meet our operating budget. We can't curb service. This is unacceptable, despite what Kevin said is his thoughtful and correct veiled threat, not that veiled, actually, threat. We've got to have the cash flow to pay back our creditors. As you know, as David has worked diligently and said consistently for several years on this board, you know, we're up to 18% debt service of our revenue. It's a significant burden. We're going to try and get that down, but we've got to pay. Our finances must balance. Second point is that the governor came through. I'm deeply impressed by this proposal. It is balanced, it is fair, it is thoughtful, it is multi-year. You know, leadership is about saying tough things and then doing the right thing, and that's what she did. No grand talk without proof. It's not a fantastic set of remarks. She didn't make comments that were grandiose and unbacked. This is the opposite. This is clear and thoughtful and smart and acknowledges that tough choices are required. Kevin outlined what's in the governor's budget. And I say with some humor that, but truth as well, that if no one's happy, it must be pretty good. Whether it's the city, whether it's the suburbs, everyone's going to participate in closing this gap. Are these the right ones? Are there good arguments for them? Look, I represent a small county in the suburbs, and I know the businesses would not like. No one wants to have increase in the payroll mobility tax, but it seems fair and it seems appropriate. And as the finance chair, I'm grateful that we have a path, and it's not one that overtly burdens the most overtapped group, which is the riders. We have small fare increases that are reasonable and consistent with history, and I think that is not an unfair path to go down. Lastly, I just want to say that what comes next is each of us will share our views about what's fair and unfair, but ultimately we must go to our elected officials in the legislature and get this thing done, because the service cuts are unacceptable. The only lever we truly own in the MTA is burdening the riders further, and that seems unacceptable as well. So we've got to get this done. We've got to support the governor, and it should be our number one priority. It certainly is my number one priority as long as I'm here. And I like the fact that we have a clear plan and that, in fact, someone will pay. So thanks, Kevin, for all that work.
Thank you. Mr. Albert?
Thank you, Chair Zuckerman, for that summary of what took place on Tuesday. That was a great discussion, and I think you're saying the right things. Service reductions should not be on the table at all. They don't pay for themselves. They actually drive riders away, which increases the budget deficit. And as Chair Zuckerman said, we have pretty fixed costs, so those costs are going to continue. The governor's plan is a great one. I hope it passes as is. One of the elements in it is money from casinos. I've been told by those in the know that under current legislation, those funds can only be used for educational purposes, so that law would have to be changed. That and the fact that those monies won't be available until 5-6 years out. Does our budget know that those funds are that far out and have taken that into account?
Yes, exactly. So the gaps until that money would come online of roughly $1 billion to a year are covered by the payroll mobility tax and the proposed city funding. So yes, I projected and showed the committee balanced budgets through 2026. As you know, some of the benefit of the federal aid starts to get less and less as we get out into 26, 27, 28, and that's exactly when we would expect the casino revenues to come in. So it's really the kind of the second wave of support that fits perfect with our financial plan.
My other question, since you just raised that, is this dependent on a certain number of casinos opening? Because it sounds like some locales are now fighting those proposals.
So the current proposal is for 3 downstate casinos, depending on where they're located downstate will impact, how much revenue we get, because there is some local allocation and depending if they're at the existing video lottery terminal. So none of that has been worked out. There's a whole process. So the $450 million that's assumed is a conservative starting number, but there is quite a bit of uncertainty as to the ultimate amount. There's a study out there that gives the range of outcomes, so forth, but there's much more to come on that.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, I mean, the overall expectation for casino revenues exceeds the plug number that was put in our 2026 budget. So it falls to the governor and the legislature to figure that out with the city, who's also in the mix on that policy decision. Mr. Brinkman and then Mr. Solomon.
Yes, Kevin. Fortunately, I'm not as financially savvy as some of my fellow board members. Could you explain the note on the pie chart regarding the COVID funds where it said benefit but not necessarily expenditure?
Sure, and it was relegated to a footnote because it's very technical in nature. So essentially, the federal COVID aid, which came in to pay for the difference between our operating expenses and our fare box revenues provided under the law, covered that deficit, which then freed up other local funds, dedicated taxes that were coming in. So just from a technical perspective, the federal COVID aid is deemed spent, but we still get the financial benefit because there's more resources stemming from that money flowing in. So it's highly technical, but it doesn't change the economics.
Money is fungible, but we just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Mr. Solomon.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Chair Zuckerman laid out a nice structure at Tuesday's board meeting for us to address the MTA's financial crisis and have this discussion. And we first started with points of clarity. So with your indulgence, let's just focus on one slide in your presentation for a moment of clarity, and then I can get into my opinion, if that's okay. So if you put up the slide on sources and uses, please. That's the one. So to clarify, estimated tax base allocation, you are not including in there any contributions, subsidies through agreements from government. Is that correct?
No, I'm including all contributions, so a combination of dedicated taxes and subsidies such as station maintenance payments, current levels of of paratransit. So this is what we see as a long list of different items, both dedicated taxes, general subsidies, and subsidies under specific cost reimbursement provisions.
So when you talk about on the budget shortfalls, the MTA bus and Staten Island Railway, you are acknowledging that the City of New York funds the full operating deficit for those two to the tune of over $500 million. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's built into the shortfalls at the bottom, but also New York City's given credit for that in the top bar.
So it's giving credit to that in the top bar.
Correct.
And so this includes then, as you noted, the operating support pursuant to 18B, $126 million from the city, commuter rail station maintenance, $115 million from the city, further costs, the MTA bus operating deficit.
Correct.
Currently $371 million because of some federal funding that brought that down, where actually projections are, in the out years could probably be approaching $1 billion.
Correct.
You're also including in there the paratransit $203 million, I believe, that was paid for the 50% in 2022.
Correct. This is actually, these percentages, because there's multiple years, so these percentages are based on looking forward. So it's based on the 2026 year, which includes actually the city having to pick up the increased costs of things you mentioned after the federal COVID relief goes away. So I actually think the city percentages, would be slightly lower if we looked in the near term.
Does it include things like the internet sales tax intercept that is worth $173 million from the city?
So
that goes towards the capital lockbox?
Right. So this is only the operating budget. So this excludes all capital funding contributions, which, as you mentioned, both the city and the state contribute into the lockbox. The internet sales tax, the city and the state both have committed $3 billion to the 20 to 24 capital program. And since 1982, the state has contributed roughly $36 billion to the capital program, where the city's contributed $13 billion to the capital program, even though the city has veto power over 70% of the capital program. But continue.
Does it include any of what we call the in-kind contributions from the city, the $550 million per year that the city pays for the NYPD to police the system? Does it include the $500 million a year that the city pays for debt service on MTA Capital? Does it include any of that?
So this does not include the cost to the city of NYPD that the city's obligated under the transit lease to provide. It neither includes the debt service that the city pays on its bonds that it's issued for the capital program, nor does it include the debt service on the $36 billion in capital that the state has provided.
So the reason why I ask these points of clarification is because the city pays on an annual basis $2.4 billion in direct and in-kind contributions to the MTA. And so there's been a lot of mention of the word fairness here, right? We all agree that we need to sustain the system. We all agree that there needs to be a long-term viable transportation system in this region. I do think if you put up a chart that talked about direct government subsidy, direct and in-kind, of all governmental entities, not dedicated taxes, then we can have a discussion about fairness. I also think that, there's been a lot of discussion and conversation leading with the chair's remarks about the momentum that we have going, not only as it shows through the customer satisfaction surveys, the COPS, camera and care that the governor and the mayor are in lockstep on and the momentum we have on crime reduction. In that customer survey, there was discussion about some areas, some specific stations that are still experiencing challenges, right? And so the point that I made on Tuesday, I make here again, which is that if you diminish the capacity of the city of New York to address services above ground, it will have an impact below ground. And the universal goal that we all share, which is to lure riders back to this system, which is the biggest problem that we have in terms of finances, will be impaired. And so I think it is important. The debate will continue, no doubt, as the state budget process continues in Albany. I did just want to make sure that for clarity, we understood in terms of how we're framing the contributions, but also to understand that at the board level, the goal of luring riders back could be diminished if you have an unfair ask of the city of New York above and beyond the $2.4 billion that it currently contributes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I guess I have to react to the unfair. Everybody's going to have their own view, so we have to respect it. We just need to remember that one of the reasons that we're all teaming up, and again, who pays how much is a debate that every year goes on in Albany. Every year, then the state and the city have a wrestling match. The difference that we've got now is you've got two principals who respect each other, who like each other, and who collaborate on 90% of things. This is one area where obviously there's a difference of opinion that's being worked through the normal process. So I want to acknowledge that the spirit of this exercise is very positive and maybe different than in the past. That said, the investments that the MTA makes to create a great that the state makes, and all of us, all the participants in MTA make below grade, also impact on what happens above grade. And the economy of the city, us bringing MTA service back in terms of on-time performance and safety together, and all the other things that are going to do contribute and will contribute to the revival of the city's economy and making sure that we can make conditions above grade socioeconomically and more equal demographically and otherwise. That is a mutuality. And what I think we all took away from Kevin's presentation and that slide that you put up, asked him to put up again, is that is that's a sources and uses that applies if the governor's proposal is accepted. And it, to me at least, reinforced that it results in as close as you can get, not having designed it to be perfectly numerically the same, pretty close to almost perfectly balanced in terms of sources and uses between what's coming out of the city and what's going to support the deficit in the city. The city portion, I shouldn't say, the transit portion of the deficit. So I thank you for taking us through that, but for me, it just reinforces that there is a great deal of equity that's built into this, but we're also respectful of the fact that the debate has to unfold, and it'll unfold in the spirit of compromise and collaboration that has governed the relations between the city and the state with these two electeds. I think Mr. Jones was next, and who's going to follow?
So,
Midori Valdivia.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to pick up something. I certainly have never hesitated to burden the city with more money. Fair Fares was a program that we helped spearhead with the Riders Alliance, and it costs the city millions. But I have to now talk with the other hat, other than as a fiduciary for here. My organization is 175 years old. It basically was created in response to European immigration, which was a major issue in terms of getting housing, health, jobs, opportunity for the poor of the city of New York, many of them immigrant-born. The difficulty I have now is we're confronted, as not-for-profits now, with the issue of nearly 50,000 asylum seekers coming to the city. Essentially, the governor, to her credit, put in somewhat in about 750 million to try to deal with that. It's almost netted out by what we're talking about here. And I am concerned that we're dealing with a major crisis for the city of New York in terms of asylum seekers that we don't have the capacity within the city to deal with, and I think the governor recognized that. But as we've said, money is fungible here. And I'm concerned that we may not have enough resources in the city of New York now, given this crisis, to deal with what is uniquely a New York City problem. But I am agnostic about how we go about this. I think this is exactly what you're talking about. We have to have a legitimate debate about what sources of money have to be put forward for the MTA. I just don't want us to be fixated, oh, it's got to be exactly New York City doing this, as opposed to other revenue sources that may be contributed and put forward by the legislature. So I don't want us to be in such lockstep that we lose sight that this negotiation has to be played out among the representatives in the legislature. And I don't want us to become the cheerleader necessarily for every, or at least board member, for every aspect of what's been suggested. But I am extraordinarily concerned now from the point of view of a not-for-profit that is trying to deal with some of the critical problems for both the poor, the working poor of the city of New York, but this new challenge that hasn't really been seen in generations of enormous numbers of people who come in without jobs, adequate health, housing, resources to cope with in the city of New York.
Okay. I think Midori Valdivia.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Jones, for bringing that perspective, because I think it time and time again we are yet again confronted that transportation doesn't stand on its own, that it is interconnected with so many other issues that are facing our region, and we know that the issues facing New York City are not necessarily New York City's alone, that there are similar issues that different regions, different cities around New York are facing in the suburban communities and the outlying communities. So I really appreciate that perspective. I think, you know, I kind of put my transportation hat on, my transit hat on, and you know, when I look at the budget, Chair Zuckerman, I really appreciate what you said about how, you know, we have to have a multi-year approach. We have to do the right thing, right? The budget has to do the right thing. And at the same time, the budget reflects the MTA priorities, right? And so we heard a presentation today about how the MTA is prioritizing expansion of accessibility. That's exciting to me. That's something that I've worked on in and out since 2015. And so my concern is that, you know, as part of the state budget, as I understand, and based on the questions I asked Kevin on Monday, is the new cost-sharing proposal where 100% of the funding for paratransit will now be, you know, sent to the city. The city would have to then be obligated for that 100%. Is that actually the opposite of the intent, the strategic intent that the MTA is doing with prioritizing expansion of accessibility? You know, I think about, it's so exciting to see the ADA elevators in the capital program. That was a big fight. That was a big prioritization issue, and so many people in the agency made it happen. But for me, it's very hard to disconnect paratransit with ADA elevators and the accessibility program. They're tied together. So I think it's, for me, it'd be hard to prioritize one without the other. So if MTA is indeed moving accessibility, keeping it on the top of the agenda, I guess the question for our board is, shouldn't it be capital and operating? Can you make investments in capital plan, and shouldn't monies also be reflected in operational funding? I think Kevin affirmed to me in our finance committee meeting that this would move, city would pay 100%, and that means the MTA will no longer pay any operational dollars towards paratransit. So I'm just concerned about that, and that was putting my transportation cap on in terms of budget as a reflection of our values, as a reflection of our priorities, and does that make sense for the MTA to move the funding in that direction? So that's my perspective right now.
Okay. Elizabeth Velez, and I think Lisa Soren is giving me the wave. Okay. And Mr. Chu. Okay. Elizabeth Velez.
Thank you, Chair. You know, we've been talking about really complicated fiscal issues that have far-reaching impacts. And I just want to take a moment to thank our MTA team for communicating this clearly with all of the stakeholders that this is going to have an impact on. And honestly, proactively, thank you, Kevin, for proactively preparing us for the eventualities that may come, right? Plan A, Plan B. I love making up backup plans. So, thank you for that. We can't go backwards. We have to move forward with the most impactful, strongest transportation system in the world. But I also want to take a minute to applaud the governor. I know we've said it around the table. We said it on Tuesday as well, for really creating a sustainable plan that's doable and that gives us the blueprint to continue to succeed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm new here, so I'm just going to say what I believe from my perspective. I think the governor's ideas are wonderful. They've been prioritized. In my experience in working with government for the last 15 or so years, my concern is that if we uniformly, we're never going to agree 100%, but I think that the governor needs to hear from us the fact that transportation is an essential component, that uniformly we support her 100%. Negotiations will always happen. I got to go to Albany this weekend, hence my mask. That says it all, right? And had these difficult conversations. And the questions were, well, how does everybody else feel? And I can't speak for the board, but I will say is that if we start with a support and we work our way into negotiations, but for the I don't want to see cuts. The Bronx, I know selfishly, I'm always going to go to the Bronx. We're headed in such a good direction. I don't want to see cuts in our borough with all the economic development that's happening. Our constituents cannot afford those cuts. So I respectfully ask that I love the way we're going. I'd love for the governor to know that we support, that we're willing to have these courageous conversations, that nothing is going to be 100%, but that we're sure as hell on the right track with this issue. And that the feedback I got in my one-on-one conversations were that Albany is really pushing for this on our behalf, and I'd love to see it pushed forward.
Okay. Mr. Chu, Ms. Barbas, Ms. Lopez.
So I had a similar, but maybe an opposite reflex to the same slide, the sources and uses. And my first reflex to the slide was, okay, that's the tax base sources, but if you added additional information to that as a percentage of employers whose employees actually use the transit system, what would that look like? And I'm still interested in that information, but I've been thinking about this and having many conversations about our budget and also the legislative process going on. And the interesting thing about a budget is that a budget's like a hard-boiled egg. And Kevin, I have to compliment you again. You have done a masterful job, chef-worthy dissection of the hard-boiled egg. And I don't think anyone could have done a better job. The truth is, the issues that we're grappling with, which is our regional economic success and our regional growth and our regional recovery, is an omelet. We're never fully going to be able to delineate the whites from the yolks. Chairman, you began the presentation by saying the interconnectivity of Long Island and New York City is a tremendous asset and benefit to both. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly what you said. Kevin probably does because he's a hard-boiled egg dissector. I think this is a sentiment that us as a board, and I really take Board Member Solomon's words to heart, that yes, the city is making big investments. There are also difficult conversations happening in the suburbs. I know they are happening in our community, but I think it's a very important sentiment for this board, especially, to send a signal, just as this budget sent a signal to our friends in Albany and to the elected leaders in their representative jurisdictions, that we are all in this together. And that should we start trying to go back to the hard-boiled egg rather than seeing this as the omelet that we are, it could very well put us on a course.
Eat breakfast.
I think I've had enough analogies. That's not the course we want to go down.
Sorry.
That's not the course to go down. I'll close because we've had a lot of conversation on this. We can't. There's always going to be an instinct to keep score, but we're going to succeed in this together, or we're going to fail in it together. And I think Kevin did a wonderful job. There's a legislative process happening beyond this, but what we control is what happens here. And I think I've really appreciated that we've been working together to do hard work and support the hard work that the staff's doing to put forward the message that's very important, is that we want to move forward and these investments need to be made and the system needs to be running at the highest capacity possible.
Keep this moving so we can get to lunch. I'm gonna kill my joke, kill my punchline. Ms. Barbas, and then
real
Ms.
quick.
Lopez.
I'll make it quick. I have to emphasize what Chair Jano said. The underground affects the above ground, and there's no debate about that. It's almost like if you have, cardiac arrest, you need to take care of that so the body is healthy. So I totally support the governor. I hope that we will too. This is so important. It's a moment in time where we have to grasp. And just expressing my support for the governor and the proposed legislation.
Ms. Lopez.
Perhaps I'm the last one to comment on this, but I think I can wrap it up with a call to action for all of us who are board members to call our state elected officials and to say we support what the governor is proposing, and we hope that they do as well. I think we are advocates. I don't like to say lobbyists because I come from the nonprofit sector as well as the government sector, so I'm an advocate. We're advocates of public transportation. We speak not just for the MTA, but for the millions of riders, not just in New York City, but in the surrounding counties. So I think that's our call to action. Let's call and let's support this. Thank you.
Mr. Samuelson.
Yeah, I just have a very quick question about something that was on the budget charts before, what everybody's talking about here. The federal money, you spoke about the federal money in a way that I've never heard it described before, which is the federal money was the federal COVID relief money was designed to make up the difference between fare box revenues and the operating budget. I've never quite looked at it that way, and I've never had any conversations in Washington either about it that way. It's for operations. It's not necessarily the way that you have sort of fine-tuned it to say that the difference between the operating budget and the fare box revenues. And I'm just curious, are we, or has the MTA, are they using the federal money for debt service? Is it being applied toward debt service, or is it being used in any other way that has something not to do directly with service?
So, let me just say that the definition that Kevin offered is the definition of the law. So that's how money was allocated in federal COVID relief, was you got the difference between your debt service, between your operating budget and your fare box recovery, your fare box revenue. So that was how it was defined. As you know, John, Mr. Samuelson, what we could use it for was defined in the law, and we complied. So I just want to reassure you that what Kevin said, you can.
Okay, but that doesn't. I just have a specific question.
Yeah.
Forget about everything else I said.
Just to be clear, okay. So, correct what the chair said. Point number one: none of the federal money is being used for capital program. Okay, it is all the federal money is being used to offset expenses in the operating budget that were not covered because of the loss of ridership revenue. So I think what I would say is the point that is important to you is that every dollar and every, whether we allocate, how it's allocated under the law or what its ultimate benefit is going to help us balance the operating budgets during this time, which is an extended time where we have deficits because of reduced ridership from COVID. So it is doing, its exact intent. It allowed the system to run during the worst times of COVID, and it's allowing us to run the system at the level we're running it during the continued and projected for the next few years, continued, lost revenue from COVID.
But does the money, so the money is being, I'm taking it by you not answering the question, that the money is being applied to debt service then? Because if there's debt service on capital work, and you're using the COVID money to pay down the debt service.
All the federal COVID money was to reimburse specific operating expenses, okay? There's other money we've used to pay down debt, but not, the federal COVID money has not gone to debt or capital.
Okay, that was a much clearer answer than the first way you tried to answer it.
Okay. On that note, let's bring this to a close. The next, what I would say that is, just by putting a point on this discussion, what we're debating is the debate that's taking place in Albany. And that's legitimate. We all come from different, we're all appointed differently, we come from different places that we represent, although we're all acting as fiduciaries for the board, for the MTA. So what we did, what the board did, was we identified a gap and a responsible budget plan that called on Albany and City Hall, and we were always talking about Albany, City Hall, and Washington. I wish they were part of this, able to be part of this a little bit more, but we were calling on Albany and City Hall and Washington to help us fill the gap that we identified in our responsible budget. The governor has offered up her plan on how to do it. Now the action is between her and the legislature, the mayor, and the city government is part of that. Other actors, state and county and other actors are part of that. But we did our part. We framed what needed to be done by the stakeholders who control the purse strings in those capitals. And so I just want to be clear that what this board did has been effective, and the debate continues, I think, in a positive direction, although some issues to be resolved. So with that, I just want to say we're going to switch now to a presentation by Kathy Rinaldi on the schedule that is happening starting on Monday. Just a reminder, to Mr. Chu's point, one of the benefits of the new Long Island Railroad schedule is more service for New York City people. So although we sometimes talk about state and city in terms, of strictly the commuter railroads versus the New York City transit properties, there are benefits to both of the commuter railroads, as there are benefits to folks from the suburbs who come to New York, half of them using the subway or the buses or our New York City transit assets. So I think your point, whether it was strictly based on the egg analogy or more broadly about the sharing of these assets that are useful to everybody, and that's the way our system works. Kathy Rinaldi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be up here with my friend Shani Fourier to talk to you a little bit more about the historic and transformational changes that are going to be happening to Long Island Railroad schedules in 4 short days, beginning next Monday, February 27th. We heard some speakers at the committee meeting on Tuesday and then again this morning talk a little bit about how these new schedules are disruptive to them personally. And we've been getting input from customers really since the draft schedules were posted back in July. Certainly, we understand that train schedules are important to their customers. People come to depend upon a certain train. And over the years, Long Island Railroad really hasn't made any wholesale changes to the way it's delivered service. So the schedule that we operate today is the result of small tweaks here and there that have been made over the decades. The schedule that we have today is also designed primarily to serve Long Island residents who commute to their office jobs in Manhattan. But this is at a time when COVID-19 has dramatically changed and continues to change work patterns. But mostly, the current Long Island Railroad schedule reflects major physical capacity constraints on the main line, in the East River tunnels, and at Penn Station itself that have existed for many years. But the good news is, since 2006, MTA has invested in 3 major, once-in-a-generation capital projects on Long Island that together have lifted capacity constraints on the Long Island Railroad network. The first of those was the double track project, which added an additional track on the main line between Ronkonkoma and Farmingdale, which provided a lot of flexibility and redundancy to the Long Island Railroad system. The second, of course, was third track, which C&D completed just a few months ago. With that third track on the main line between Floral Park and Hicksville, Long Island Railroad can now run express service, local service, and reverse peak service, which is huge for the economy of the region. And finally, Grand Central Madison, which opened as a limited shuttle service a few weeks back, gives our customers an alternative to Penn Station and direct service to East Midtown, which is the biggest job hub in America. These 3 new projects gave us new capacity that gave the Long Island Railroad the opportunity to look again at our service schedules and rethink them from top to bottom so that they meet the needs not only of today's customers, but potential future customers. So these once-in-a-generation investments provided the opportunity to do a once-in-a-generation strategic overhaul of our service. What were the goals of that overhaul? Number 1, to provide more frequent and reliable service to more customers. Number 2, we were able to space trains out more evenly and avoid bunching and large gaps between service. And number 3, to provide true reverse peak service between New York City and Long Island, which creates a host of economic opportunities both in the city and on Long Island. Finally, as Jana just said, we can provide more frequent service within Queens and Brooklyn. These are communities that the Long Island Railroad train frequently bypassed, despite the fact the public transportation options in those communities were relatively limited. As it turns out, all of these changes and this rethinking of our service plan could not have come at a better time, as Amtrak plans to close the East River tunnels for extensive repairs to address damage from Superstorm Sandy. These projects will affect capacity within Penn Station. And these, of course, are the tunnels that both Long Island and Amtrak uses to access Penn Station. So the ability to direct more trains into GCM will provide Long Island Railroad with the ability to continue to serve customers during these disruptive projects. So what do these new schedules mean for Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island? As Jana indicated a little while ago, it is a 41% increase in overall service. But what does that really mean? First and foremost, it means that a Long Island Railroad train pulling into either Penn, there will be a Long Island Railroad train pulling into either Penn or Grand Central approximately every 3 to 6 minutes in the peak period. For customers who work in East Midtown, they won't need to transfer to the subway or walk across town. The GCM station extends from 42nd Street all the way up to 48th Street. There will be more frequent service into Atlantic Terminal, with trains approximately every 12 minutes in the peak and approximately every 20 minutes in the off-peak, compared to 15 minutes in the peak and 30 minutes off-peak today. And finally, these new schedules will be transformative for Brooklyn and Queens residents who commute to Midtown. The new schedules are bringing 523 station stops in Brooklyn and Queens every day. This slide shows you some of the service increases that are a representative sample of stations across the territory. So the first 3 stations obviously are Queens stations. Laurelton is going to see 19 additional trains a day, Bayside 21 additional trains a day, Kew Gardens 29 additional trains a day, and then at 2 mainline stations you're going to see 78 additional trains in Mineola, 78 additional trains in Hicksville. There have been other critical improvements to commuter rail service over the course of the last several months. We're absolutely thrilled to see the strong customer satisfaction numbers across both railroads. Over the course of the past few months, we've expanded the city ticket flat fare not only to the weekends, but also weekdays off-peak. And as the governor announced a few months ago, we're working to expand it to peak hours as well. Last August, we combined the train time app so that we have a single app for trip planning and ticket purchasing across both railroads. Since that launch last summer, we've had more than 1.5 million downloads. And then we recently announced the combo ticket to allow for seamless connections between the two commuter rails. We're thrilled to see that local officials and customers are so excited about the new service. It is an exciting time for the Long Island Railroad. It is an exciting time for the region. Local electeds and our customers understand the value that public transportation brings to the economy and the quality of life of their customers and their constituents. We've heard positive things from people who've made their way through the new GCM terminal about how the new service will benefit them, will save them time, and just the beauty of the new space. Finally, the new service is absolutely transformational. It will be a new way of riding the Long Island Railroad. Nothing is ever perfect. To sort of build on Sammy's analogy, it's a bit of an egg salad sandwich when people are used to chicken salad. It takes a little while to get used to egg salad, but we will be watching ridership closely over the next few months. We continue to hear from customers who like their chicken salad, who don't necessarily want to move over to an egg salad sandwich, but we are looking at how schedules are affecting them directly. We are going to monitor ridership closely. We will continue to have outreach to our customers. We're going to observe how many customers will shift over to GCM, how many new customers we actually attract to the system. All of these inputs will have an effect upon how we schedule trains in the future. I'm now going to hand it over to Shanifa, who's going to talk about the Herculean efforts that her team undertook to make sure that Long Island Railroad customers are kept informed about all these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, Monday is day one of the new service schedule, and we are excited and ready. As Kathy mentioned, our team has been preparing for months now. We've been previewing the opening of the station since the fall, and we're really, really excited. Many of these efforts took place during February 8th when we also pushed out the final schedule. And we're excited and cannot wait to have people within the station and a more robust approach. Since then, our team has pulled every lever, as Kathy mentioned, to ensure that our customers are fully aware of the full service beginning February 27th. We've been running audio announcements on platforms and on trains. We've created beautiful and clear signage, oftentimes branch-specific signage. We've displayed that signage with both in-station and on-screen, as well as paper too. We've been publishing updates in our train time app, which is more than a third of our customers that use it for trip planning. We've been aggressively using social media, email, text alert, and our website for updates. We've also held countless community meetings and dialogues and engagements with civic groups as well as stakeholders. And we've reached more than a million customers, as Kathy mentioned, through these efforts and digital screens. And finally, on Monday and throughout next week, we are deploying hundreds of extra ambassadors throughout the system to answer questions and distribute handouts and additional information to help our customers navigate with Wayfinding. To sort of jump back to November, we held a Wayfinding exercise where we recruited over 200 generous volunteers to participate in this exercise. They navigated the system and the concourse, which helped us better inform different amenities that we can use to enhance our customer experience throughout the system. We asked them to sort of find exits, platforms, elevators, and vending machines. Several of their recommendations have been folded into permanent signage, and we continue to work with Kathy and her team to address, those ongoing wayfinding issues. So with that being said, I look forward to everyone coming out on Monday and joining us as we welcome those new customers as we launch the full service. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Tessitore.
So I just, you know me, kind of a shout out to our employees. You know, this is an amazing undertaking, and our frontline crews and all the behind the scenes people, their lives are changing drastically as our customers are. You know, their trains went away, changed. So, there's going to be a lot of adjustments. As an operations guy with almost 30 years, I can guarantee you there's going to be some growing pains. And all I would ask is our riders to be as equally as excited as our crews are to deliver this service, understanding that, we need to be respectful. We need to share the feedback that needs to be shared regarding service holes and any kind of issues that may arise. But, be fair to our crews. Be fair to our frontline employees who are also in the same boat of readjusting and their lives getting turned upside down. And in the long haul, this will be a great thing, increasing this kind of service. But, let's not forget our frontline people that are going to help us all through this.
Useful reminder. Thank you. Ms. Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question with respect to the ambassadors. Aside from the orange-colored vests, do they have a pin? Does it say MTA ambassador, something to identify them or recognize them?
I think it's just the vest, but I think they're pretty conspicuous when they're on the floor. So up to this point with the shuttle service, it hasn't really been an issue with respect to people not knowing where to go for information.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Kathy. And, taking off on Mr. Tessitore's point, thank you to the workforce that's going to make this a success. The good news is more service and is going to mean more jobs, and we all recognize that. But people do have to change, adjust a little bit as well as the riders, and I appreciate your reminder that we have to support the crews as they do it. So this has been an excellent discussion. And now we would move on, if everyone's okay with that, to our more routine board business. The minutes of the January board meeting and minutes for each committee have been distributed. Comments, corrections, cries of pain? None from Mr. Albert. I see none from anyone else. No further corrections. The minutes are approved as distributed. Let me kick off this month's committee reports with one committee that I chaired, which was Safety. Safety Committee met on Tuesday, and I report the following. There's one action item for board approval. The Federal Transit Administration within USDOT requires an annual review and approval of the New York City Transit Agency Safety Plan. Mr. Samuelson was especially involved in helping us to get there. The committee recommends these plans, and I move them. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The item carries. On behalf of Mr. Mack, who I think is operating remotely, I'll do the B&T committee as well. B&T met on Tuesday. There are no actions from the committee. However, the committee voted in favor of the 2022 TBTA Operation Surplus Resolution. The resolution is part of the Finance Committee's report, which Board Member Zuckerman will provide momentarily. Moving to Joint Railroad, Board Member Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Long Island Railroad and Metro North Railroad committees met on Tuesday, and I report the following. There's one item for board approval. The item is a contract modification for additional funding for continuation of as-needed bus service throughout the Metro North territory in the amount of $7.5 million. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The item carries.
This concludes the Joint Railroad report.
Transit and bus. Ms. Mahaltis not being here, I'm going to ask Mr. Solomon.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Honorable Chair Mahaltis, the New York City Transit and Bus Committee met on Tuesday and reports the following. There is one action item requesting board authorization for the reduction or elimination of station booth service throughout the subway system. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Second. Yeah. Any opposition or abstention? Okay, the item carries.
There is one non-competitive modification in the total amount of $7.2 million to extend maintenance services for buses and depots equipped with bus camera security systems. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Second. Any opposition or abstention? The item carries.
This concludes the New York City Transit Report.
Ms. Barbas, can you present Audit Committee report?
Yes, good morning, Chair. The Audit Committee met on Tuesday. However, quorum was not present. MTA's independent auditor presented MTA third quarter 2022 consolidated interim financial statements. Today, we request members of the Audit Committee accept the third quarter 2022 financial statements.
I need a motion and a second from members of the Audit Committee. Barbas, Soren, Barbas,
Motion, second.
Soren, second, Solomon, almost second. Any opposition or abstention? Okay, the item is carried.
This concludes the Audit Committee report.
Back to Mr. Solomon for Capital Program report.
Mr. Chair, the Capital Program Committee met on Tuesday and reports the following. Construction and Development has one modification for $8.7 million. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Second. Ms. Soren, any opposition or abstention? The item carries.
This concludes the Capital Program Committee report.
Finance Committee, Mr. Zuckerman.
Thank you, sir. The Finance Committee met on Tuesday, and besides the aforementioned collegial February plan financial discussion, I report the following. Yeah, I went off piste. It's okay. It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, that's right. Bop, bada, bop, bop. Okay. Two action items this month. The first is seeks board approval to authorize the MRT2 escalator payments to Dutchess, Rockland, and Orange counties. And the second seeks board approval for the 2022 TBTA operating surplus transfer resolution. Committee recommends these actions, and I move them.
Second. Mr. Poor, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? The item's approved.
Thank you.
Neil?
There is one non-competitive item for $4.2 million for a 3-year extension for the open trip planner system with Cambridge Systematics. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second. Ms. Velez, any opposition or abstention? The items carry.
Thank you. There are 3 real estate items this month. I'm going to separate these into 2 motions, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask for a motion on the 2 items for a conveyance of property interest by Metro North and 2 property acquisitions on behalf of New York State Transit. If you wouldn't mind taking a vote on that, I'll move that, please.
Second. Ms. Lopez, any opposition or abstention? The item carries.
Thank you. There's a 3rd real estate item for an MTA-wide policy amendment affecting COVID-related abated rents for retail tenants. I'd love David Florio to come up and just give a couple of minutes on the movement. It wasn't fully vetted. Thank you, David. Your mic is ready to go, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. In October of 2020, the board passed a policy to address COVID-related effects of rent on our tenants, our retail tenants at stations. And what that policy did was abate rent fully from April 1, 2020 through July 31 of 2020. From August 1 through the end of 2020, the rent for station retail tenants was the greater of 10% of their fixed rent or 10% of gross receipts. From January 1st of 2021 to date, the rent was 20% of fixed rent or 10% of gross receipts, whichever is greater. Our tracking of gross receipts of these tenants in the marketplace reveal that they are nowhere near a position where the policy, which expires May 1, we're going to see an enormous amount of arrears and tenants unable to make 100%, pay 100% of the rent. Consequently, after conferring with Chair and Senior Management, we're proposing to extend the policy through the end of this year so that it is a greater of 20% of their fixed rent or 10% of gross receipts up until the earlier of December 31 of this year, or when a given agency hits 75% of pre-COVID ridership.
So the proposal is to extend the current policy to the end of this year. That's the bottom line, Mr.
Yeah, I think there's a reasonable recommendation. I believe it did not get the airing it did. David, thank you for the diligence. I won't ask for a separate vote from the Finance Committee, but I'd like to move these items to the full board, if you don't mind, sir.
Mr. Jones is seconded. Any opposition or abstention? The item carries.
Thank you, sir. This concludes the Finance Committee report.
The final set of items for the board considerations related to labor agreements. So may I have a motion to convene executive session to discuss matters relating collective bargaining pursuant to Section 105(1)(e) of the New York State Public Officers Law. Motion Ms. Soren, second. Mr. Solomon, we're in executive session. Thank you. Okay, while in executive session, the board discussed and voted affirmatively on labor agreements between the MTA and various labor unions. May I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Velez, thank you. Ms. Lopez, thank you for the second. All in favor? Motion, the meeting is adjourned. I made a mistake. I promised Mr. Miranda that we would hear from him before we adjourn. I apologize.
In the spirit of the egg salad, nothing related with money. I just want to make sure that for the record, that one of the consistent themes since I joined this distinguished board has been how to lure people into the system. But I consistently hear a population that wants to use the system and feel that they are unable and is the immunocompromised. And I would like at some point to have a sidebar conversation, and I'm volunteering you, Midori, to the sidebar with Mr. Davey to try to find a solution and make sure that we're hearing the immunocompromised that wants to use the system, but they feel that they can't. There are some alternatives that are being used in other metro systems around the world, including Rio de Janeiro, that they have dedicated wrapped cars, limited cars to serve very specific needs of the population. So something just to say that, we are hearing the comments and that we're taking it seriously. So thank you.
Okay. Mr. Brinkman going to string us out. Go ahead.
No, this is probably not what Frankie wants, but what I would, not a compromise, but I think we should have a more robust public service announcements that masks should be recommended on her. We're not requiring it, but I mean, we should make a point that masks should be strongly recommended on public transportation. And that's all I want to say.
Okay. All right. I think with that, we'll return to our motion to adjourn, which is on the table. All in favor? Any opposition? We are adjourned.
Thanks for your patience. Here we go. It is time for Ben Brockville. Now, Mr. Jenna Lieber.
My public. Okay, this was a great meeting. We had, I think, a productive and open discussion about the issues that are on the table in the budget, but what wasn't lost on anybody was where we were a couple months ago, which was how do we, what do we do? How do we adopt a budget given what we know about revenue and where we stand? And we adopted a budget that said straightforwardly, we need Albany and City Hall and other stakeholders to step up. And that's the way we're going to get to a secure financial MTA. And Governor Hochul did that. Governor Hochul, as Neil Zuckerman, our finance chair, said, showed leadership by putting on the table a balanced budget. Now, the phase that we're in, Albany is going to have the usual budget dance. That is what we all expect this time of year. But I'm never going to stop saying that it was an important, really important step that the governor put on the table, a plan which is balanced and which sets the floor, in my view, for the negotiations and the resolution that are to come. And I'm incredibly optimistic because the folks that I've talked to in Albany are looking at this as we have to get to the same place, which is a secure MTA for at least the next 4 years of our financial plan. So that was number one. The other great thing that you'll never stop hearing me talking about is our progress on accessibility. We have on Paratransit, we're almost at 100% customers relative to pre-COVID. Service is better than it's ever been, and customer satisfaction has gone up 30 points in 15 months. So those are the standards that really move me, and the fact that we're moving forward with a capital program that has as many ADA accessibility projects in it, station-wise, as the last 3 capital programs combined, is also indicative of our passion on this issue. You know, we talk about system expansion, you know, something like Grand Central Madison and IBX, the Interborough Express, and other projects, Penn Access. But there's also system expansion when you bring transit to people who were not included before and who didn't have true access. Those are the folks who rely on, who need what ADA accessibility provides. So that moves me a lot, and I was very proud that we were pushing forward with 17 new stations with 29 elevators. 12 of those stations are going to be done this year, and that we're rocking and rolling on accessibility. It's a huge, huge priority that the MTA has embraced and gotten pretty passionate about. So with that.
Great, and we welcome, for the very first time to the MTA headquarters in this news conference, a veteran reporter, Evan Simcoe Bednarski of the New York Daily News. Evan, welcome.
Evan, I got to say that the Daily News seat on transit is, you got a lot of history in front of you. I mean, for example, you know, the summer of 1969, you got big shoes to fill, buddy. Summer of 1969, a couple things going on. Daily News passionate, the Wood, about the fare hike. Small item below the fold, man on the moon. You see the Daily News's priorities, and we know that you're going to carry it forward with honor.
I appreciate that. Our priorities are always in order. I've got a question for you on the subway surfing. There was another incident overnight, luckily not a fatal incident. But two-parter. Generally, what's the reasoning behind having riding, you know, on the roof or outside the subway under the same legal code as riding in between cars? Has there been any thought in changing that? And then a little bit less technical, but just what can the agency do? Has there been a push toward, you know, further push towards education? I know there's been talk about social media pushes. Have any of those companies, you know, has there been a dialogue this week at all between the MTA and any of the social media companies?
So number one, I mean, we can't talk about this issue without acknowledging this is something that sort of tears at New York's heart. A 15-year-old kid who's like a New York family on the verge of, you know, what we all think is and hope is going to be, you know, the good things in life, and lost his life, and the family is suffering. They're left behind to suffer. We want to alter the trajectory of this issue. And you're right that we haven't historically distinguished between where people are riding outside the train, because frankly, you know, there are all kinds of places and ways that people commit that infraction. They're all dangerous, Evan. You know, we can't say, oh, subway surfing, that's dangerous, but standing between cars when you're going around a curve, there's a reason that we don't want people to stand between cars for any reason. And because when they go around significant curves, the separation opens up and bad stuff happens. So riding outside the train is dangerous, full stop. What to do about this issue? Number one, the PD, the NYPD is on it. They arrested a kid last night. At Queensboro Plaza, a 17-year-old was riding, you know, it was described as a subway surfing incident by the police who made that arrest. In the rear of the train, and they were on the scene, and they've been staking out the stations where this tends to happen, and it's no secret where they are. It's the trains that go over the elevated trains, the 7 line in Queens, and the trains that are going over the Williamsburg Bridge. So the police have been staking out the stations where this happened, and they have literally, they haven't charged everyone, but they apprehend the kids who are doing this, and they get in touch with the parents, and they are doing what they can. And I just acknowledge the PD for making this a priority. But the other variable is the glamorization of this behavior, this incredibly dangerous behavior by social media. If people were posting videos of Russian roulette with live ammo, I don't think that TikTok would let them run. I'm not an expert in any of this. Constitutional law, social media behavior. I don't really have a lot of social media accounts at all. But I don't think they would run video of people playing Russian roulette with live ammo. That's what they're doing when they put up videos of people standing on the top of trains. That's what they're doing. They're glamorizing it and they're encouraging it, and they have to be more responsible. So we have gotten in touch with, 3 or 4 of these social media companies. I'm not going to go into it, but we have meetings set up. They know why we're calling. We're asking for the meeting. There's no mystery. And we're expecting them to take some action, because otherwise, I'm not talking about law, but in my heart, they are contributing to kids dying. In my heart, I know that, and they got to stop.
Right at the other end of the table, Danielle Moyo-Dunn of Politico. Good afternoon, Danielle.
Good afternoon. Hi, Jano.
Hi.
I wanted to ask if you could just provide some more detail on the upcoming public process for the toll hikes, specifically a few questions. So is the toll hike under consideration still also 5.5% like fares? And should we interpret anything from the fact that the toll hike, at least so far, isn't scheduled at the same time as fare hikes? It seems like you're
we're not. The purpose of what we did today is not to separate them. It's just that there is a different process to effectuate a toll hike from a transit fare increase. So we had to start the toll process under the State Administrative Procedures Act. Now there's a different process for transit fare increases that allows us not to start at the exact same time. So there wasn't really a purpose to differentiate between them other than just to follow the rules, so that, when we get to the end of the budget process in beginning of April, we will be able to effectuate whatever it is.
To clarify, it's 5.5% too, and could you just go over the revenue projection for this year?
All right, well then I'm going to need Brother Willens. The revenue projections, well, you got to ask the right guy.
Thanks. Yes, it's 5.5% is the assumption both on fares and tolls. This year, we're expecting sometime in June, again, depending on how the process plays out, but that's what's assumed in the financial plan. And the full year number of that 5.5%, so not in 23, but if you look at a full year, net to the MTA is about $360 million. The $100 million that was referred to is that incremental amount versus the old base assumption of just 4% fare increase. We've proposed 5.5 in November, so $100 million is a kind of the full year benefit of that extra 1.5%.
All right, we move on to Larry Higgs. He's on Zoom of the Newark Star Ledger and NJ.com. Larry Higgs.
Thanks very much. Longtime writer, first-time caller. Calling because I'm doing an article about Congressman Josh Gottheimer. Had a press conference where he said the MTA projects with congestion pricing that the Port Authority would lose roughly $125 million annually in toll revenue, an amount he projected to reach $125 billion over a decade, which he contends will jeopardize regional Port Authority projects. How do you respond to what he said?
Listen, I don't know the numbers that he's come up with. I don't know any of it. Honestly, Mr. Higgs, I just find it slightly amazing that the self-styled leader of the Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress is against solving small problems like climate change, congestion, and in our United States' largest city that prevents ambulances from getting to hospitals and police from getting to crimes in progress. Small issues like that, it seems to me that the Problem Solvers Caucus might be interested in. And, you know, it's a head scratcher to me that, I mean, I know that this congressman you're talking about is, you know, sort of styles himself as super bipartisan, but it mystifies me that he would choose to follow the the motto of the prior administration in New Jersey, time for more traffic problems in Fort Lee.
Are those contention, the figures he quotes, are those in an MTA report somewhere? I could not find them when I looked.
Yeah, you've answered your own question. They're not in any MTA reports, and I have no idea where they came from. And you know, any of that kind of work is based on complex modeling, so I have no idea who would have performed that kind of work.
And we move on to David Colon, who is sitting right in front of you from Streets Blog. Dave, good afternoon.
Hi, Jana. I had a couple congestion pricing and a bus question for you. There was another thing that I don't know how much more you wanted to talk about, Josh Gottheimer, but at that protest that they were having today, they were saying that you guys are resisting making riders pay for MTA upgrades. So I just wanted to know if you wanted to respond to that idea at all.
Resisting making riders pay.
The quote was, the solution here is the MTA will not ask the riders to be the source of funding for MTA expenses.
Well, I mean, obviously, we have a higher fare box recovery ratio. Before COVID, we have a much higher fare box recovery ratio than any other transit system in the United States. Right now, because of COVID and the reduction in ridership attributable to work from home, we are in the range of where other transit systems, other large transit systems were before COVID, which is about 35%. We were about 55% before. So we are the most fare box efficient. Historically, the MTA has been the most fare box dependent, and maybe on the view of this congressman, the most fare box, we put more of the burden on the riders than other systems. And so, in fact, I'd say based on those stats, we are less subsidized. Our riders are less subsidized on a percentage basis than New Jersey Transit, for example, and other transit systems in the United States. So I'm not sure I understand the argument that's being put forward.
And then again on congestion pricing, the financial plan that came out this month did say that congestion pricing's beginning slipped back to the second quarter of 2024, and that cost another $250 million on how much you were planning to raise next year. How many more delays can the MTA afford on this at this point?
Listen, I don't honestly. That's not the issue. We just have to get it done because we are able to complete our capital program, which is 80% state of good repair. These are the investments that make sure that this 100-year-old system doesn't fall apart. And we've experimented with not investing in state of good repair in the past. For example, between the last financial crisis and the late 2010s, and it did not go well. It resulted in the 2017 summer of hell, among other things. So we have to invest in state of good repair. That is the principal purpose of that last $15 billion of our capital program. We need that money. But to your question, from a cash flow basis, we don't need the money tomorrow. And so far, we have been able to fund and advance all the projects that were scheduled to be advanced in our capital program. At some point, we do need that congestion pricing money.
Can we afford, this gets pushed back to third quarter of 2024?
Listen, we have some more time, but it's not endless. So I am continuing to push forward. There's one thing that keeps getting obscured in the debate, and I guess Mr. Higgs is covering it from New Jersey, so I'll make it. The congestion pricing was not an idea that was developed at an over-lubricated MTA strategic planning meeting, right? It's the law of the state of New York adopted in 2019. The MTA is just going about its business executing what was a decision by the legislature and the governor of the state of New York that it was time to do something about the fact that, New York is the worst congestion of any city in the United States. It's harming our economy and our air quality and our health. It contributes to traffic violence, people getting killed on the streets of New York, and the opposite is mass transit is used by 90%. Mass transit or walking is used by 90% of the people who come to our central business district. So we are comfortable asking those who, for whatever reason, have to drive or are going to drive to make sure that we're solving the congestion pricing and that we're also making mass transit better and more available, so everybody, the 90% of people who use it can continue to use it, and maybe even more people will use it.
All right, we got to move on, Dave.
Come on,
move on. We got colleagues waiting. We're going out east to your colleague at Long Island's Newsday, Alfonso Castillo. He's standing by, appears from the Home Office, but he's liberated the giant microphone from the Melville studio. Alfonso, good afternoon.
Hi, guys. Thanks for doing this, Jano. Monday's a big day with the full opening of Grand Central Madison. I had a couple questions on that. First, are there any ridership projections for Grand Central Madison? I know at one point the MTA was talking about 160,000, roughly half of all its daily commuters. Obviously, it's not going to be that. I don't know that the LIR carries 160,000 riders on any day. But do you still expect that roughly half of commuters will want to use Grand Central Madison?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is we don't absolutely know, but the breakdowns of origin and destination of the commuters, from what I understand, overall ridership is lower, but the origin and destination information seems to be about roughly the same. So we're not revising those numbers. We'll see. I mean, Alfonso, to your point, there are going to be some folks who are accustomed to certain commutes who may not change it at the outset, right? People are accustomed to their routines. So we don't know, but the origin destination information suggests that about half of the commuters would have a faster and more convenient commute if they went to the east side to Grand Central.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about sort of expectations for Monday. I know you and others have said that the reviews for Grand Central Madison have been positive so far, and that's been my experience too. But of course, the rest of the schedules haven't been affected yet. That happens on Monday.
Yeah.
Leading up to that, certainly I've heard from a lot of riders who are really concerned about these changes. So are you bracing yourself for the possibility or even the likelihood that there's going to be a lot of upset riders on Monday?
Hey, listen, and nobody likes to have their routine changed. And, loyal Long Island Railroad commuters who have they have their trains, they have their people that they've traveled with, they have conductors that they know. Those patterns of behavior are deeply ingrained. And when people came back from COVID, some of them were thrilled to kind of get back to their old routine. So I totally respect that some people are going to feel like riding a train at a different time with maybe a different group of people, maybe even to a different place, is disruptive. It may take a little while for folks to adjust and recalibrate. I completely expect that. But the flip side is that there are going to be thousands of people, and you've heard it from some of the folks who are even jetting to Grand Central, to Grand Central Madison on the Grand Central Direct service, who are going to be thrilled that their commutes just became shorter, that, as Governor Hochul says, we gave them back the thing that is most valuable, which is time. So, yeah, we'll have a process of settling in, and we're going to have a lot of folks out there, right, Kathy, to help people find their way if it's unfamiliar for whatever reason. And the main thing is we just have so much more service that over time, I think people are going to really appreciate the optionality, that they can get a lot of trains at all times of day in all directions that may have been unavailable before. Kathy, anything you want to add?
No, I was just actually going to make the point that you just made, which is we're going to do our best to make the transition a smooth one. We're going to have a lot of people out in the system, helping people navigate the new terminal. It's going to be a change. Change comes hard sometime, but we're really excited about providing this additional service and flexibility for our customers.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to stay, Kathy may want to stay handy because we're going to stay on Long Island with Carolyn Gussoff. who, there she is in the car with CBS 2. Carolyn.
Hi, just to follow up on Alfonso's point, I also have been talking to commuters about the new schedules, especially the Oyster Bay branch, where a lot of them are going to see significantly longer commutes because they still have to go to Penn Station and they've lost trains, and trains are staggered much more widely. Some people described an ungodly hour versus or an unacceptably late hour. So what's the message to the people whose commute is not getting better? And you know, there are thousands of them on that branch that can't access the east side. They still have to go to Penn Station, but they're seeing longer commutes.
Okay. Well, you know, like I said, we're going to keep studying people's travel patterns. We definitely want everybody to benefit from this. There is 10% more service on the Oyster Bay branch than than before. So there's an overall increase of service, and there is 50% more service in Mineola, which that branch connects to. So we completely respect that people like one-seat rides, but they have opportunities to connect to just a ton more trains. I'm checking for the numbers on Mineola, but they're huge. I mean, there's a huge increase numerically in Mineola. It's going from 142 trains in Mineola to 215, a 51% increase. So, again, a lot more service where they connect, the Oyster Bay branch. Now, the other reality is the Oyster Bay branch, and folks know this, has got some constraints on it physically. It's got one-track territory, some other constraints. So, again, the goal is for everybody to get a little bit more, and I hope that over time people will start to recognize that those Mineola connections, which come one after another, are going to be a plus.
All right, just to keep it together, also reporting, I think, on the Long Island Railroad is Elijah Westbrook from CBS 2.
Okay.
Elijah.
That's right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Jano. Nice to meet you virtually. My question, not necessarily pertaining to LIRR, at least for right now, but it's in regards to e-bikes. You know, we often hear about the dangers of e-bikes charging in people's homes and how quickly the batteries ignite when they're not being charged properly. But there's been some concern about people who travel with them on trains and where they can be charged. I'm curious to know, what is the policy with charging these devices on MTA property, and is the MTA working on some sort of rescue plan, God forbid, if one of these things catch fire on the trains?
So the most important thing to know is we're going to make sure that nobody's charging bikes on the train, which is the thing that causes those fires, right? That's the most important thing that we can do. But they're a big feature of our overall transportation landscape increasingly, and you don't want to discourage people who want to use transit but need that last mile connection, whether it's with their point of origin, say in the suburbs, to get to the train station, or if they just want to use that bike in the city or to get around, or somewhere else. But we have been working on this, and we've been looking at all the issues, and I'm going to turn it over to Pat Warren, our Chief Safety Officer.
Thank you. To answer your second part of the question, which was what do we do if God forbid, there's some incident out there? We already have very robust plans for dealing with any kind of incident out there. So this would be, if this did happen, it would be handled in much the same way. So there's no problem there. And you just heard the biggest thing that will happen with it. We're not going no charging. There's been no credible evidence out there of bikes or any kind of devices just self-igniting unless they've been plugged in. So I think we're in pretty good shape there.
Okay, thank you. And I just have one more question, if I can sneak this in. There was mention earlier in the board meeting about Amtrak doing work on the East River tunnels, which could potentially impact service on the LIRR. Can we get some sort of update on that? And will trains potentially have to be, rerouted to Grand Central Madison while all that work is
So the important thing, it's a good question. The important thing is the service that we're putting together will continue through the Amtrak East River tunnel work. It is designed to allow Amtrak to do their work. We have finished the work on all of the MTA tunnels. not a secret. We knocked out the L train. We didn't stop service. We did the work while service was continued. We did the same with the Rutgers Tunnel and the other tunnels. I think we have 8 underwater tunnels that we have completely rehabbed. Amtrak still needs to get to their East River tunnels. Even, despite the passage of time. So the new service will continue, without impact, although Amtrak is going to move around which tunnel they're working on, so on and so on. But the service will continue through the Amtrak East River Tunnel project.
And we continue here with Nolan Hicks of the New York Post.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. To circle back to the new schedule launching, I guess it's Monday. Say you have a commuter coming in from Lynbrook to 2 Broadway. A quarter of the LIRR's ridership is bound for either Brooklyn or for Lower Manhattan. Currently, their trip would take 50 minutes if they left at 8 in the morning. Similar trip now would take somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour and 5. That's plus 15 minutes. How are they winning on the new schedule?
Listen, Nolan, I don't know how you calculated, what assumptions you made about ridership. I'm happy to get into it offline. The bottom line is Atlantic Terminal is going from 116 trains a day to 155 trains a day. It's going to have more frequent service in the peak. Instead of having a train every 15 to 18 minutes, it's going to have a train every 12 minutes. And we're excited about how we think that the Atlantic Terminal piece of our network is actually going to benefit from the way we're structuring things now. But I can't answer the question because built into it, I assume, is some assumption about how long it takes to get certain trains to get to Lower Manhattan versus other trains. We'll have to take it offline.
Well, the assumptions are all based on punching in Lynbrook and then punching in 2 Broadway into Google Maps. So, and that's how a lot of people are going to try to figure out the new schedule. So if the new schedule is you've got a double connect, the new double connection through Brooklyn would take an hour and 5 minutes, and coming in via Grand Central and then down on the 4 as the alternative would take an hour and 4 minutes. So no matter what permutation Google cooks up, someone coming in from sort of the South Shore and Nassau has a commute that's 15 minutes longer each way. How do they win on the new schedule?
Well, let us. I think we have. We can get into it offline. I just can't really respond to that. Kathy, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say, a Lynbrook customer would probably, who previously went to Atlantic Terminal, would probably not go to GCM. They would probably go to Penn, get on a train to Penn. That takes, however long it takes to get into Penn, and then they would hop on the train down from Penn to 2 Broadway. So they're not going to go to GCM to go to 2 Broadway. They're going to go to Penn. And there's plenty of options to Penn. If they want to go to GCM because they want to check it out, they can do that too.
All right, we move right along down the line to Michelle Caskey of Bloomberg News. There you go, Michelle.
Hi, thank you.
Can I just say, Nolan, I think you're a Brooklynite. I'm a Brooklynite, and I use the Atlantic Terminal station a lot. And when I show up there in the morning, there aren't a lot of trains. They're widely spaced. They're going to be much more frequent. You got to recognize we have both reverse commute benefit, and we have just greater frequency. We have to look. There are always going to be specific travel patterns that may be altered. I don't know whether it's being evaluated correctly, but as you go through these issues, you got to recognize more frequent service, and for people who live in East New York. People who live on Nostrand Avenue stop. These stations are getting like 50% more stops every day. There's a lot of beneficiaries, especially people who are going to the Grand Central area, our biggest job concentration. But obviously, we got to look at individual trips and see how they work out.
All right, Michelle, did that answer your question?
You can only hope, right? So this might, you might need some help from Kevin on this question, but I'm just wondering, with the updated financial plan, and if you guys were talking about how you already reduced the deficit by spreading out the federal money and not having to use all of it so quickly. But if the legislature doesn't approve Hochul's plan or doesn't approve an alternative that matches the funding level that Hochul's talking about, are you back to a potential $3 billion deficit out in 2026, or is that risk completely off the table because of changes that you've already made?
Well, I think I will ask Kevin to join me, but the bottom line is we've identified deficits that are the size of the deficit that we've been talking about, 600 million this year, 1.2 billion next year, rising a little bit, I think, by a couple hundred million through 2026, which is our plan period, are assuming that we've done things that we're doing. We're restructuring the debt. Restructuring the debt, so we're bringing down the percentage of the MTA operating budget that goes to debt service down from something pushing, 18% down to 15%. Important issue that people in the industry you cover.
Yes, but are you able to redo that refinancing?
Let me finish.
Okay.
We're doing it. That's what I'm telling you. We're doing it. Then we're also saving for the MTA is going to belt tighten and save $400 million irrespective. That's led to a sizing of the deficit that I just described to you, which is 600 in 2023, 1.2 billion in 2024, rising to what, 1.8? 1.6 in 2026, okay? That's the gap that we, in effect, by adopting our budget the way that we did, that we said to the purse string holders in Albany and City Hall, this is the size of the problem. Mm-hmm. The governor's plan addresses that, number one. Addresses the whole thing out through 2026, and it also goes beyond because it has the casino revenues beyond the plan period. Okay? So the governor's plan solves the whole problem. She responded to what the board asked. Okay? So far, the discussions that I've had in Albany is people want to solve that problem, but there's a debate about exactly how to do it. So I am hugely optimistic, number one, and thankful to the governor. The other piece of but our responsibility as as stewards of this this service, this system, is to plan even if the percentages are not so high, but we have to plan the downside scenario. That's why what you heard from Kevin and you heard a little bit from me, is real, which is we can't just bury our heads in the sand. If there's a risk, however small, that the government, that the budget in Albany will not deal with our problem, then we have to plan for some serious action quickly. And that's why what Kevin showed, the schedule of how long it takes to effectuate that, is real. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't get out of Albany what we need very quickly, we have to start moving on the ugly fronts we don't want to be active on, which is major fare hikes, major service cuts, and layoffs. So that was what you heard today. What was unclear in that discussion? What was unclear?
Is that, I hate to be negative, but if you don't get from Albany what you need and you're in that
we will be acting on some version of Plan B, which I told you about. Yeah, which is
numbers-wise, what does that look like? Does that look like an estimated projected $3 billion deficit in 2026, or is it even in worst-case scenario,
1.6, right?
you can still do the financing and refinancing, and you're at 1.2.
So just remember, the $3 billion deficit projection was if we elected to kick the can and just spend all the federal aid over the next couple of years and not take action. So what the board approved when they approved the budget in December was taking the actions that Jano just described of bringing the deficit down to 1.2 to 1.6 billion in 26, and then asking the stakeholders to fill that balance, where if that balance doesn't get filled, we're not going back to the kick the can scenario.
Okay.
We're going to fill that 1.2 to 1.6 billion additional through the other actions that we don't want to take in terms of layoffs, higher fares, and service cuts.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
All right, back to Zoom for Steve Nesson, WNYC, Gothamist. Steve, good afternoon.
Hey guys, and hi Jano, thanks for taking the question. I have two, if you would be so kind. And the first is nothing we've discussed yet, but interesting. I just want to get your comment about, perhaps you would call it an imbalance in the racial demographics of the MTA's workforce and its top leadership. I found fairly recent statistics that show New York City Transit workers are 47% Black, 24% white, yet the leadership at that agency has 68% of it is white and only 17% Black. And I think overall, 81% of New York City Transit workforce are minorities. I understand that Demetrius Critchlow holds a very high position, but that's very recently that he's been appointed to it. Do you have any comment about the MTA never having a non-white chairman or head of New York City Transit either, for that matter?
So I don't have any comment about that. I can only tell you what we've done with the jobs that we have, and I don't like to talk about our team in demographic terms, but since you're insisting on it, I will. So I came in, we have Chief of Staff, Laura, we have a very strong female representation in the front office of the MTA. Chief of Staff, Laura Wiles, General Counsel Paige Graves, Chief Administrative Officer Lizette Camillo, Senior Advisor and Acting Customer Service Officer Shanifa Riera, Senior Advisor Naomi Rennick, and on, the new head of the people operation is a gentleman named Hugo Pizarro. I could go on and on. The jobs that I've had an opportunity to fill have been, I'm very proud of the diversity and most of all the caliber of the people. I don't know the stats that you're talking about, and I don't have any comment on what my predecessors or anybody else may have done to fill any particular job, only about my job, my job actions.
Okay, I appreciate that. And back to the topic we've been discussing, can you say when the MTA will announce exactly how it will do those belt tightening measures to save $400 million?
Yeah, so the process that we have underway identified so far $100 million for 2023. We have the goal, we have to hit $400 million for 2024 and beyond. The process is underway. The goal we've set for ourselves is those have to be implemented and starting to bear fruit by mid-year. If we're not able to, we're doing what we don't want to do, which is to start to sweep vacancies and to deal with jobs a little more of a blunt sword. But so far, the leadership, the two leaders of the agencies that are responsible for effectuating this, Rich Davey at Transit and Kathy Rinaldi at the two railroads, have been pushing forward. Steve, just for what it's worth, we've been at this cost efficiency effort since the beginning of 22. So it's, we've dug in a fair amount. There's, a couple dozen different initiatives that are being explored, and depending on how well they work, we will dial up ones that are most effective and find new ones and get to our goal, because otherwise we're going to be just cutting jobs, and that is not an efficient way to run an organization.
All right, we move toward conclusion. Ben Brockfeld is here from AM New York. Ben, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jano. I wanted to follow up on the budget. Looking at this presentation, seems much in terms of the budget gap on this pie chart here. It says, and you've talked about it a little bit, with $100 million of the budget gap would be covered by additional fare and toll revenue. And when you say 400 million in operating efficiencies, has there been any consideration of doing 500 million in operating efficiencies and avoiding a fare hike altogether, or doing the smaller fare hike as had been previously floated?
We don't just make up the numbers for convenience. 400 million is a stretch, and we before we set the goal for what the fare adjustments were going to have to be, we figured out what was the reach goal for operating efficiencies that we wanted to establish. As I said, I did that at the beginning of 2022, so it's over a year ago, and we've been working on it ever since. So it wasn't just like an arithmetic exercise of like do this or do that. It was a reach goal that was set after a lot of discussion and analysis. And it's ambitious, but we're going to get there. The $100 million that you're talking about is the 1.5 on top of the 4%. Ben, you know that for 10 years the MTA was doing 4% every 2 years. We skipped a year. We skipped one cycle of this. So I look at the 5.5 as merely kind of restoring where we would have been, except for the incremental fare increase that was abandoned at the height of COVID. So that's my philosophy, was that MTA was successful with doing these small incremental increases. That, by the way, affordability, the New York City, the MTA system is wildly affordable by international standards, and especially compared to the cost of owning an automobile. So it is the one thing, our transit fare and our commuter rail fares are the one thing that make New York more affordable, unlike almost everything else in New York. So we're very proud of that. We're proud of the one price system that gives you a lower cost per mile that you have available to you than anywhere else. We think that we're continuing to look at at fare increases as something to be avoided, but not entirely, because we don't want to open up gaps between operating costs and our fare revenues, which is what caused the subway system to go into bankruptcy in days of yore. That's what we want to avoid. These little incremental increases seem to be the way to go. It worked for 10 years, and we're restoring.
Can you go a little bit more into the $100 million in efficiencies that you mentioned are going to be effectuated this year? A little more on what those involve. I remember something about work trains, which seemed like, dare I say, low-hanging fruit, because it sounded like it was some inefficient way of
Get out of the journalism racket. Come work with the MTA. You seem to know a lot. Low-hanging fruit. Come tell us what else. Come on. Low-hanging fruit. What else you got? What else you got?
There was some. I don't have it in front of. I
Not
don't
right
have it
now.
in front of me.
Not right
but
now.
Not right
You have
now.
to come up with some other low-hanging fruit.
Yeah,
Okay.
when I'm the
Come on over, Davey. Tell us about low-hanging fruit.
The fruit in the floor, the low-hanging fruit. So I think a few things we've talked about already. I think Kathy and I gave a presentation in November and talked about some specific initiatives. But one that I've talked about and is continuing to bear fruit, or eggs, I'm not sure what metaphor we're using today, is predictive maintenance, right? And so the work that our bus team has been doing over the last couple of years, we piloted a predictive maintenance program with a company called Pretech, and that continues to bear fruit as an example. We're also focused on employee availability. We've talked a lot about that, and so getting back to pre-COVID numbers in terms of employees who are on the payroll being able to be here at work, right? And so that's another key piece. We've a number of other initiatives we're working on, but those are two of the probably more prominent ones, at least in New York City Transit, we're focused on.
What was the thing with the work trains again? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting.
It was low-hanging fruit, so you understood it.
Low-hanging fruit with the work trains.
I think it's they break down a lot, and we need to fix them. How's that? No. I mean, there's a couple. I mean, there's that issues for sure, but I think there was an energy component to the work trains as well. They're old. We're bringing on, I think, 13 new ones, as I recall. We can get you more details, but again, we'll give you a work train job if you're interested.
All right, closing out the questioning work today is Jose Martinez of the city.
So before we do that, because Jose will want to get into sandwich options, I was just prompted to remind folks, just in answer to the question earlier about Grand Central Madison and the East River Tunnel work, that Amtrak wants Grand Central Madison to open because it allows us to get a lot more trains across the East River, allowing them to do work on some of the East River tunnels. So the opening of Grand Central Madison is important to them as they begin this somewhat delayed East River Tunnel project. Jose.
Just teed up my question about when the sandwiches come to Grand Central Madison.
Yeah.
But I have two other questions. On the city and state funding proposal that the governor has called for, and you acknowledged today that there's some controversy, as you described it, even among your own board members. Has there been a thought or a push by the MTA to nudge the federal government for more in this setup? And my last question is, you said you are on some social media networks. What's your handle so we can follow you? Send your friend invites.
All I've got is LinkedIn, honest, and don't send me a message there because I don't look at it. Okay, that's all right. So what was the other question? Was,
about the funding dynamic.
You know what we did? Before so, a couple months ago, we actually sent letters to Congress and to the Secretary of DOT reminding them that COVID is not over for mass transit, that although the MTA has a roughly 12% budget gap or fiscal cliff relative to the size of its entire operating budget, the rest of the country, those numbers are, the major transit systems, much larger. New Jersey Transit's in the middle 20s, I believe, just based on public information. Chicago is somewhere in the middle 20s. LA, I think, is in the middle 30% in terms of the impact of COVID and ridership fall off to their operating budget and the resulting deficits. So, we have appealed to leaders in Washington to keep in mind the need to continue to invest in filling the operating budget gaps brought on by COVID. But we got to solve our problem today, and so far we haven't seen a lot of action in Congress. Chuck Schumer, who is always our guardian angel in the Congress, I know is looking at, but he doesn't have sole control, and so we're looking to Albany and to City Hall.
And specifically as it relates to paratransit, given that the proposed funding shift would put about 100% on the city? And I know that's part of the budget dance, but...
Yeah, I mean, listen, again, we could debate it, but this is not just sticking it to the city. We were focused, I think the governor's team, were focused on realigning some aspects of the city-state cost-sharing relationship applying to MTA that were not consistent with other parts of the state. The paratransit systems in Westchester and Nassau and Suffolk are funded, principally funded by the localities, by the counties. They're the financial responsibility of the counties. There may be some other inputs, but that's the big picture. And, we're paratransit principally, but also the bus, the school bus and mass transit transportation pattern in New York is inconsistent with what it is in other places. So the governor's request is just saying, let's, put those couple of items on the same footing that they're on with respect to other relevant jurisdictions.
All right, that's a wrap from Lower Manhattan. Thank you, Jano, Kathy, Pat, Kevin, and Rich. And thanks for all your questions. Have a great afternoon.